The coffee cup sat untouched on the white tablecloth, steam rising in delicate spirals that Malcolm Prescott watched with detached fascination. Anything to avoid the stares. Anything to pretend he didn't notice the whispers rippling through the cafe like a cold wind. The woman who was supposed to be his date had taken one look at him, at his wheelchair, at the careful way he'd positioned himself at the corner table, and her face had done something complicated. Something ugly. She'd mumbled an excuse about a family emergency, her eyes never quite meeting his, and walked away so quickly her heels had clicked a frantic rhythm on the marble floor. That was 7 minutes ago. 7 minutes of sitting here like a fool while other diners pretended not to watch. 7 minutes of remembering why he'd stopped trying to date after the accident. 7 minutes of feeling like every eye in the room was counting his failures, measuring his worth against the man he used to be. Malcolm's hands gripped the wheels of his chair, knuckles white. He should leave. Call his driver. Return to his penthouse where the walls didn't judge and the silence didn't mock. But something stubborn in him refused to move. He was Malcolm Prescott. His company employed 3,000 people across 5 states. He'd built an empire from nothing, survived a car crash that should have killed him, learned to navigate a world that suddenly saw his wheelchair before they saw him. He wouldn't run from a cafe because some shallow woman couldn't see past his legs. A little voice broke through his thoughts, high and sweet and utterly unguarded. "Mommy, why is that man sitting all alone?" He looked sad. Malcolm's head turned toward the voice. A small girl stood a few feet away, maybe 5 years old, with 2 puff ponytails decorated with bright red ribbons. Her brown eyes were wide and curious, fixed on him with the kind of directness only children possess. No pity. No awkwardness. Just pure, simple concern. "Ivy, sweetheart, we don't point." The woman beside the child spoke gently, but her own eyes had found Malcolm's face. She was beautiful in a way that caught him off guard. Natural. A nurse's scrubs in deep blue, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, her features showing the kind of tiredness that comes from too many long shifts and not enough sleep. But her smile was genuine when she looked at him, and something in Malcolm's chest, something that had been clenched tight since the accident, began to loosen. "I'm sorry," the woman said, guiding her daughter closer. "She's at that age where she says everything she thinks." "I like that age," Malcolm heard himself say. Adults could learn from it. The little girl, Ivy, cocked her head to the side. "Were you waiting for someone? Because if you were and they didn't come, that's not very nice. My teacher says we should always be nice." "Ivy," her mother warned softly, but Malcolm shook his head. "Your teacher is right. And yes, I was waiting for someone. But I think maybe they got lost." "Oh, that's okay then," Ivy announced with the confidence of someone who'd solved a great mystery. "Getting lost isn't mean. It's just confusing. Right, Mommy?" The woman's expression had shifted into something closer to understanding. She looked at the empty chair across from Malcolm, at the 2 menus still on the table, at his carefully neutral expression that probably wasn't neutral at all. "I'm Nora Wilson," she said. "And this is my daughter, Ivy. We just finished her doctor's appointment and came here for a special treat. Hot chocolate for her, coffee for me. Would you like some company? No one should sit alone in a cafe. It makes the coffee taste wrong." Malcolm felt something catch in his throat. Kindness. Pure, uncomplicated kindness from a stranger who had no idea who he was, who saw a man alone and decided to do something about it. "I'm Malcolm. And I think your daughter might be the wisest person I've met in a long time. I'd like that very much." As Nora pulled out the chair across from him and Ivy scrambled onto her own seat, already chattering about the hot chocolate she was going to order, Malcolm felt the weight in his chest shift. The stares from other tables didn't matter anymore. The woman who'd walked away was already fading from his memory. Here in this moment, with a little girl who saw him as just a sad man who needed company and a woman who'd raised her to see people, really see them, Malcolm felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. He felt seen. The waiter approached, his earlier sympathy replaced with professional courtesy now that Malcolm had company. Nora ordered hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for Ivy and black coffee for herself. Malcolm asked for the same. "So, Malcolm," Nora said, settling into her chair with the ease of someone comfortable in her own skin, "what do you do when you're not getting lost on the way to cafes?" Before he could answer, Ivy piped up. "Do you work at a castle? You look like you work at a castle." Malcolm laughed, a real laugh that surprised him. "Not quite a castle. I work with computers and businesses. It's not nearly as interesting as castles, I'm afraid." "Everything is interesting if you look at it right," Nora said, and there was something in her voice that suggested she'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Ivy and we find interesting things everywhere. Today we saw a dog wearing a sweater at the hospital. Yesterday we counted 17 different kinds of cars on our walk home. Life's full of small wonders if you pay attention. The hospital? Malcolm asked, his businessman's mind immediately catching the detail. Nora's hand moved to rest on Ivy's head, a protective gesture so instinctive it seemed unconscious. Ivy has a heart condition. Nothing immediately dangerous, but we do regular checkups. Today was one of those days. I'm very brave, Ivy announced. The doctors say so. I don't cry when they do the tests. You are brave, Malcolm agreed. Then to Nora, are you getting the care you need? The right specialists. Something flickered across Nora's face. Pride maybe, or wariness. We're managing. I work as a nurse at County General, so I know the system. We make it work. The waiter returned with their drinks, and Malcolm watched as Ivy's entire face transformed at the sight of her hot chocolate, piled high with melting marshmallows. The pure joy in that small face, the way she looked at her mother with such complete love and trust, it made something ache in Malcolm's chest. This was what mattered. Not boardrooms or stock prices or dates who judged him by his limitations. This connection. Realness. Love given freely. Can I ask you something, Malcolm? Nora's voice pulled him back. Of course. That woman who left. Did she leave because of the wheelchair? The directness of the question should have stung, but coming from Nora, it didn't. It was simply honest. Yes, he said. She did. Nora shook her head slowly. Then she's the one who lost something today. Not you. My grandmother used to say that a person's character shows in how they treat people when there's nothing to gain. That woman showed you exactly who she is. You should thank her for leaving before you wasted any more time. Mommy's smart, Ivy said through a mouthful of marshmallow. She knows everything. Not everything, baby, Nora said with a soft laugh. But I know enough to recognize a good person when I see one. Malcolm felt heat rise in his face, an unfamiliar sensation. Compliments usually felt empty to him now, weighted with pity or politeness. But this felt different. Real. I could say the same about you. Not many people would stop their day to sit with a stranger. Life's too short to walk past people who need a friend, Nora said simply. And besides, Ivy was right. You did look sad. Now you look less sad. That seems like a good use of our afternoon. They talked for over an hour. Malcolm learned that Nora was 28, had been a nurse for 6 years, loved her job despite the exhausting hours. Ivy was her world, the light that kept her going through double shifts and difficult patients and a life that was harder than she made it sound. She didn't mention Ivy's father, and Malcolm didn't ask. Some stories needed time before they could be told. He told them about his accident 3 years ago, the car crash on a rain-slicked highway that had put him in this chair. The months of rehabilitation. The slow process of building a new life that looked nothing like his old one. He didn't mention his company or his wealth. For this moment he was just Malcolm. Just a man having coffee with a kind woman and her delightful daughter. When they finally stood to leave, Ivy hugged Malcolm's leg with the unself-conscious affection of a child who hadn't learned to be careful with her love yet. I'm glad you weren't sad anymore, she said. Can we have coffee again sometime? Ivy, we can't just invite ourselves, Nora started, but Malcolm cut her off. I'd like that. Very much. If your mother agrees. Nora looked at him for a long moment, and Malcolm wondered what she saw. Did she see the CEO? The billionaire? The man in the wheelchair? Or did she see what he hoped she saw, what he felt like when he was around her and Ivy? Just a man who wanted to be part of something real. Next Saturday, Nora said. 2 o'clock. Same place. But fair warning, Ivy will want to tell you every single thing that happened during her week. She's very thorough. I'll look forward to it, Malcolm said, and he meant it with an intensity that surprised him. As he watched them leave, Ivy's hand tucked securely in her mother's, Malcolm felt his phone buzz. His assistant probably wondering where he was. The real world calling him back. But for the first time in 3 years, the real world didn't feel quite as heavy. There was a reason to look forward now. A little girl in red ribbons and a woman who saw people, who taught her daughter to see people, who had turned his worst day into something else entirely. Malcolm wheeled himself toward the door, and for once, he didn't notice the stairs. He was too busy thinking about next Saturday. Have you ever felt invisible, like the world stopped seeing the real you? Drop a comment below and tell me what you think about Malcolm and Nora's first meeting. And don't forget to subscribe because this story is just getting started. Malcolm spent the week in a state he barely recognized as anticipation. Monday's board meeting passed in a blur of quarterly reports and profit margins that usually commanded his complete attention. Tuesday brought contract negotiations that he handled with half his mind while the other half wondered what Ivy might tell him about her week. By Wednesday, his assistant Diane commented that he seemed distracted, and by Friday his physical therapist remarked that he was pushing himself harder than usual, as if preparing for something important. He was. For the first time in 3 years, he cared about something beyond his company. Beyond proving to the world that a man in a wheelchair could still run an empire. He cared about keeping a promise to a 5-year-old girl and seeing Nora's smile again. Saturday morning, Malcolm woke at 6 despite having nowhere to be until 2. He went through his exercise routine with extra care, showered, and then spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing what to wear. He settled on dark jeans and a deep green sweater, casual enough for coffee but put together. Not that it mattered. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. Except he was. He absolutely was. At 1:45, Malcolm was already at the cafe, positioned at the same corner table. He'd called ahead to reserve it, claiming it was his favorite spot. The staff, who'd witnessed his abandonment the previous week, seemed pleased to see him return. The young waiter from before gave him an encouraging nod. At precisely 2 o'clock, the cafe door opened and Ivy burst through, her mother following close behind. Today Ivy wore yellow overalls and a white shirt, her hair in the same puff ponytails but with yellow ribbons this time. Her face lit up when she saw Malcolm. "You're here," she exclaimed, running toward him. "Mommy said you would be, but I was worried you might get lost like last time." Nora caught up, slightly breathless, dressed in jeans and a red sweater that made her skin glow. "Ivy, slow down. We don't run in restaurants." "Sorry, Mommy." But Ivy was already climbing into her chair, bouncing with barely contained energy. "Malcolm, so many things happened this week. Do you want to hear about all of them or just the most important ones?" "All of them," Malcolm said seriously. "I've been waiting all week." Nora settled into her own chair, and something in her expression suggested she was pleased by his answer. "I warned you she was thorough. Don't say I didn't give you fair warning." For the next 20 minutes, Malcolm learned about Ivy's week in minute detail. Her friend Tyler brought his pet turtle to show and tell. She learned to spell the word butterfly, all by herself. They had pizza for lunch on Wednesday and it was pepperoni, her favorite. Her teacher read them a story about a brave princess who saved herself instead of waiting for a prince. And on Thursday she lost a tooth and the tooth fairy brought her a whole $1. Malcolm listened to every word, asking questions, admiring the gap in her smile where the tooth had been, nodding seriously when she explained that Tyler's turtle was actually pretty boring because it mostly just sat there. Across the table, Nora watched them both, her coffee growing cold, something soft and wondering in her eyes. When Ivy finally paused for breath, Nora laughed. "I think you've talked poor Malcolm's ear off, baby. Maybe let him share something now." "What did you do this week, Malcolm?" Ivy asked. "Did anything exciting happen?" Malcolm considered lying, making up something that would sound interesting to a 5-year-old. But Nora had been honest with him, and something about that honesty deserved the same in return. "I went to a lot of meetings," he said. "I talked to people about business things. Not very exciting, I'm afraid. The most interesting part of my week was looking forward to seeing you both again." Ivy processed this with her characteristic seriousness. "Were the meetings boring?" "Sometimes, yes." "Then you should find a more interesting job." "My mommy's job is interesting. She helps people feel better." "Ivy's right," Nora said, her lips quirking in a half-smile. "I do help people feel better. It's not always easy, but it matters. What you do should matter, not just make money." "It matters to me," Malcolm said quietly. "I built my company from nothing. It represents years of work, of believing I could do something meaningful. After my accident, a lot of people thought I should step down, let someone else take over. I stayed because it mattered. Because proving them wrong mattered." Nora's expression shifted into understanding. "That's different then. That's fighting for yourself. That's important too." The waiter appeared and they ordered. Hot chocolate for Ivy, naturally. Coffee and sandwiches for the adults. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. Nora talked about her work, the challenges of hospital politics, the rewards of helping people through their worst moments. Malcolm found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did, the pressure of being Malcolm Prescott, CEO, sliding away until he was just a man having lunch with people he liked. It was Ivy who brought up her heart condition as casually as she discussed Tyler's turtle. "I have to go to the doctor a lot because my heart doesn't work exactly right. But it's okay. Mommy says we just have to be careful and pay attention." "That must be scary sometimes," Malcolm said gently. Ivy considered this. "Sometimes. When I have to get tests. But Mommy is always there and she holds my hand so it's not so bad." And the doctors give me stickers after. Malcolm's gaze shifted to Nora, and he saw the strain beneath her calm exterior. The worry she carried, the weight of being solely responsible for a sick child. Are you seeing a good specialist? He asked. Nora's shoulders stiffened slightly. We see a cardiologist at County General. Dr. Patterson. He's competent. Competent isn't the same as the best. The best isn't always accessible to people like me, Nora said, and there was an edge to her voice now. I work 3 12-hour shifts a week, pick up overtime when I can. We have insurance, but it doesn't cover everything. Dr. Patterson is good enough and we're managing. Malcolm leaned forward. What if you didn't have to just manage? What if Ivy could see the absolute best pediatric cardiologist in the city? Dr. Rachel Okonkwo at Memorial Children's Hospital. She's world-renowned, trained at Johns Hopkins, published groundbreaking research on pediatric heart conditions. I know her personally. I could make a call, get Ivy an appointment. Nora's jaw tightened. We can't afford Memorial. Their fees are 3 times what county charges. I would cover it. All of it. Whatever Ivy needs. No. The word came out sharp and Ivy looked up from her hot chocolate, suddenly attentive to the tension at the table. We're not a charity case, Malcolm. I appreciate the offer, but we handle our own problems. Malcolm felt frustration rise in his chest. Pride. He understood it, had lived by it his entire life. But this wasn't about pride. This was about a little girl who deserved the best possible care. It's not charity, he said carefully. It's one human being helping another. You sat with me when I was alone. You brought light into a dark moment. Let me return the kindness. By throwing money at us? Nora stood, gathering her purse. Come on, Ivy. We should go. But Mommy, we just got here. Ivy's voice trembled on the edge of tears. I like talking to Malcolm. Malcolm's heart sank. He pushed too hard too fast. Classic mistake. He approached life like a business deal, identifying problems and solving them with resources. But this wasn't business. This was a woman who'd fought for everything she had, who didn't want handouts even when they were offered with the best intentions. Nora, please sit down. I'm sorry. I overstepped. She hesitated, looking between Ivy's distressed face and Malcolm's genuine regret. Slowly, she lowered herself back into her chair. You don't understand what it's like, she said, her voice quieter now. Ivy's father left us 2 months after her diagnosis. Said he couldn't handle the stress, the medical bills, the uncertainty. He walked away from his daughter because she wasn't perfect. Since then, I've done everything by myself. Paid every bill, made every decision, carried every burden. I can't let myself get used to someone else carrying the weight. People leave, Malcolm. They get tired or scared or bored and they leave. I can only rely on myself. The pain in her voice was sharp and real, and Malcolm understood it in a way most people couldn't. People left me too, he said quietly. After the accident. Friends who couldn't deal with my limitations. A girlfriend who said she loved me but apparently loved the man I was, not the man I became. My own father suggested I sell the company, said I couldn't run it effectively from a wheelchair. I know what it's like to be abandoned when you need people most. I know about doing everything alone. Nora met his eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition. The acknowledgement of shared wounds. But, Malcolm continued, I also learned that accepting help isn't the same as being weak. When I was in rehabilitation, I had to let therapists help me relearn basic tasks. I had to let nurses assist me with things I'd done myself since I was a child. It was humiliating. But it was also necessary. And it taught me that sometimes strength is knowing when to accept kindness. Ivy, who'd been watching this exchange with wide eyes, reached across the table and put her small hand on her mother's arm. Mommy, you always tell me it's nice to accept help. You said when Grandma offers to babysit, we say thank you because she loves us. Maybe Malcolm loves us too? Out of the mouths of children. Malcolm saw Nora's eyes fill with tears she refused to let fall. I don't love you yet, Malcolm said gently. But I care about you. Both of you. In 1 week, you've given me more genuine human connection than I've had in 3 years. You've reminded me what kindness looks like, what matters beyond balance sheets and quarterly earnings. Let me do this. Not as charity. As friendship. As one person who wants to help because he can, not because you're weak or needy or any of the things you're afraid of appearing to be. Nora wiped at her eyes quickly, a nurse's practiced efficiency at controlling emotion. It's too much. It's a phone call and some money I won't miss. Compared to what you've given me, it's nothing. What have we given you? We just sat and talked. Exactly. Malcolm's voice was firm now. You saw me. Not my wheelchair, not my limitations, not my company or my net worth. You saw a sad man sitting alone and decided he deserved company. Do you know how rare that is? How valuable? The silence stretched between them, filled only with the ambient noise of the cafe around them. Finally, Nora drew a shaky breath. If we do this, if I let you help with Ivy's medical care, I need some boundaries. This doesn't make you responsible for us. It doesn't mean we're a burden you've taken on. And if at any point you want to walk away, you can. No hard feelings. No guilt. Agreed, Malcolm said, though privately he thought the idea of walking away from these two was already impossible. And you can set any other boundaries you need. This is your decision, your life. I'm just offering to open a door. Nora looked at her daughter, who was watching her mother with complete trust, certain that whatever decision was made would be the right one because her mommy always knew what to do. Malcolm saw the moment Nora chose love over pride, her daughter's well-being over her own discomfort with accepting help. Okay, she said. Thank you. We'll see Dr. Okonkwo. And I will pay you back even if it takes years. You already have, Malcolm said. But if it makes you feel better, sure. Ivy, sensing the tension had broken, grinned and returned to her hot chocolate. Crisis averted in her child's mind, the adults having worked out their complicated adult problems. But as Malcolm watched Nora slowly relax, saw her shoulders lower and her grip on her coffee cup loosen, he knew this was just the beginning. He'd crossed a line today, moved from stranger to something more. Friend seemed too small a word for what he felt. Too limiting for what he wanted to become to these two people who'd stumbled into his life and turned it inside out in the span of a week. They stayed at the cafe for another 2 hours, conversation returning to easier topics. Ivy's school. Nora's co-workers. Malcolm's physical therapy routine. By the time they left, exchanging phone numbers and promising to connect about the appointment with Dr. Okonkwo, Malcolm felt lighter than he had in years. As his driver pulled up and he prepared to leave, Ivy hugged him again, her small arms fierce around his neck. Thank you for helping my heart, she whispered. You're a good friend. Over her head, Malcolm met Nora's eyes. Thank you for letting me, he said. On the drive home, Malcolm made 2 calls. The first to Dr. Okonkwo's office, securing an appointment for the following Tuesday. The second to his accountant, ensuring a line of credit was available for whatever Ivy's treatment might require. Money he'd earned, money he could spend however he chose, and right now he chose to spend it on a little girl with a brave smile and a mother who'd taught him to see the world differently. It wasn't until he was home, alone in his penthouse overlooking the city, that Malcolm let himself acknowledge the truth. He wasn't just helping a sick child. He wasn't just repaying a kindness. He was falling. Falling for a woman who wore exhaustion like armor and raised her daughter with more love than most people had in their entire bodies. Falling for a child who saw people as they truly were and loved them without reservation. Falling into something that felt like home in a way his expensive penthouse never had. And the most terrifying part? He wasn't scared. For the first time since his accident, since his world had turned upside down and his body had betrayed him, Malcolm felt like he was moving toward something instead of away from it. Toward light. Toward connection. Toward a future that looked nothing like what he'd planned but felt more right than anything had in years. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold, winter asserting itself with aggressive wind and a sky that promised snow. Malcolm had his driver pick up Nora and Ivy from their apartment at 8, the appointment with Dr. Okonkwo scheduled for 9. He'd offered to meet them there, but Nora had insisted they ride together, saying it would be easier. Malcolm suspected she wanted moral support, and he was happy to provide it. When they pulled up to the address Nora had texted him, Malcolm felt his stomach drop. The apartment building was functional at best, run down at worst. Cracked concrete steps led to a dingy entrance with a broken buzzer system. Laundry hung from some of the balconies despite the cold. This was where Nora was raising Ivy? On a nurse's salary, probably barely making rent, with medical bills piling up and a daughter who needed constant monitoring? Nora emerged from the building holding Ivy's hand, both bundled in winter coats that had seen better days. Ivy's was slightly too small, her wrist showing beneath the cuffs. Nora's was practical but thin, not nearly warm enough for this weather. Malcolm's driver, Thomas, jumped out to open the door for them and Ivy's eyes went wide. Mommy, this is the fanciest car I've ever seen, she breathed. It's just a car, baby, Nora said, but her own eyes betrayed her discomfort. This was Malcolm's world. Drivers and expensive vehicles and medical specialists who required appointments booked weeks in advance unless you knew someone. She was out of her element and it showed. Once they were settled in the back seat, Malcolm caught Nora's eye. You okay? Nervous, she admitted. I've never been to Memorial. It's where all the rich families take their kids. I've heard stories from other nurses. The building alone cost more than my entire apartment complex. The building doesn't matter. Dr. Okonkwo does. And she's brilliant, Nora. If anyone can help Ivy, it's her. What if she finds something Dr. Patterson missed? What if Ivy needs surgery? What if it's worse than we thought? Malcolm reached across the seat and took Nora's hand, the gesture feeling both natural and revolutionary. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. Then we deal with it. Together. One step at a time. But worrying about what-ifs won't help anyone. Nora squeezed his hand briefly before letting go, a silent thank you. Beside her, Ivy was pressing her nose against the window, watching the city pass by with a child's endless fascination. Memorial Children's Hospital was everything the name promised. A modern glass building with murals painted by children on the walls, a lobby that felt more like a cheerful play space than a medical facility. Volunteers in bright blue vests greeted them at the door. The receptionist smiled warmly at Ivy, offering her a sticker and a coloring book while they checked in. Dr. Rachel Okonkwo met them in her office 10 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the kind of confidence that came from years of saving children's lives. She shook Nora's hand first, then Malcolm's, then crouched down to Ivy's level. Hi, Ivy. I'm Dr. Rachel. I heard you're very brave when you go to the doctor. Is that true? Ivy nodded solemnly. I only cry a little bit. And only if it hurts. That sounds very brave to me. How about we talk to your mom for a few minutes, and then we'll do some tests to see how your heart is doing. Sound good? Okay. But Malcolm has to stay too. He's part of my family now. Dr. Okonkwo's eyebrows rose slightly as she glanced at Malcolm, who felt heat rise in his face. But Nora just smiled and said, He is. He's a very good friend. For the next hour, Dr. Okonkwo was thorough in a way that put Nora visibly at ease. She reviewed Ivy's medical history, asked detailed questions about symptoms and episodes, explained each test before performing it. She was patient with Ivy's questions, honest about what might feel uncomfortable, and generous with her praise when Ivy stayed still during an echocardiogram. Malcolm watched from his position near the door, his wheelchair angled so he could see both Ivy and Nora. He watched Nora's shoulders gradually relax as Dr. Okonkwo demonstrated her expertise. He watched Ivy trust this new doctor because her mother trusted her. And he felt something expand in his chest, something warm and fierce and protective. This was what mattered. Not his boardroom battles or his company's stock price. A little girl getting the care she needed. A mother finally able to breathe because someone was sharing the burden. The simple, profound act of making someone's life a little bit easier. After the tests, Dr. Okonkwo invited them all into her office. Ivy was given another sticker and permission to color at the small table in the corner while the adults talked. Malcolm positioned his wheelchair next to Nora's chair, close enough that he could offer support if needed. Okay, Dr. Okonkwo began, pulling up images on her computer screen. Let's talk about what we found. Ivy has a ventricular septal defect, a hole in the wall between the lower chambers of her heart. Dr. Patterson's diagnosis was correct. However, the hole is slightly larger than his notes indicated, which means it's causing more strain on her heart than previously thought. Nora's hand flew to her mouth. How much larger? Enough that I'd recommend surgery sooner rather than later. If we wait, there's a risk of complications. Pulmonary hypertension, enlargement of the heart chambers, increased susceptibility to infections. All things we want to avoid. Surgery, Nora repeated, her voice hollow. When? I'd like to schedule it within the next month. The procedure is relatively straightforward. We'll go in through a small incision, patch the hole, and Ivy's heart should function normally. Recovery takes a few weeks, but most children bounce back quickly. She'll need to take it easy for a while, no strenuous activity, but she should be able to return to normal life relatively soon. And if we don't do the surgery? Dr. Okonkwo's expression grew serious. The hole won't close on its own at this size. Over time, the strain on her heart will increase. She'll get tired more easily, become more susceptible to respiratory infections, potentially develop arrhythmias. Her quality of life will decline. The surgery has risks certainly, but not having it carries greater risks in the long term. Nora looked at Malcolm, her eyes wide with fear. He wanted to take her hand again, pull her close, promise her everything would be okay. But he couldn't promise that. He could only be present, steady, an anchor in the storm of her terror. What are the risks of the surgery? Malcolm asked, his business mind kicking in, needing data, needing to understand the full picture. There's always risk with any surgery, especially cardiac procedures. But in Ivy's case, she's young, otherwise healthy, and the defect is accessible. I'd put the success rate at about 95%. I've performed this procedure hundreds of times. I'm confident we can help her. The cost? Nora whispered. Let's not worry about that right now, Dr. Okonkwo said gently. Memorial has financial assistance programs, and I understand Malcolm is helping facilitate care. The important thing is making sure Ivy gets what she needs. Malcolm nodded. Whatever it costs, we'll handle it. Nora looked like she wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. She was too focused on the word surgery, on the fear of her daughter under anesthesia, on an operating table, on the knife edge of risk that separated this life from the unthinkable alternative. I need to think about it, Nora said. Talk to my family, process this, figure out the logistics. Of course, Dr. Okonkwo said. Take a few days. But don't take too long. Timing matters here. She pulled out a folder of information, handing it to Nora. This has everything you need to know about the procedure, the recovery, what to expect. And here's my direct number. Call me anytime if you have questions or concerns. Day or night. They left the hospital in a daze. Ivy chattered about the stickers she'd received, unaware of the weight pressing down on her mother's shoulders. Thomas drove them back to Nora's apartment, and Malcolm found himself reluctant to let them go. He wanted to follow them inside, make sure they were okay, sit with Nora while she processed the news. But that would be crossing a line, wouldn't it? They were friends, not family. Not yet. Nora, he said as Thomas opened the door for them. Can I take you both to dinner? Nothing fancy, wherever you'd like. I just think maybe you shouldn't be alone right now. Nora looked at him for a long moment. There's a diner 2 blocks from here. They have good burgers and a kid's menu. If you're serious about not fancy, that's where we'd go. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 6. Malcolm, you don't have to keep doing this. You got us the appointment, you heard the diagnosis. You've done more than enough. I'm not doing this because I have to, Malcolm said quietly. I'm doing it because I want to. Because I care. Because sitting at home in my penthouse alone sounds terrible compared to burgers with you and Ivy. Let me be here, Nora. Please. Something in her face crumbled just a little. The wall she kept around herself, the protective barrier that said she could handle everything alone, it cracked. Okay, she said. 6 o'clock. But I'm buying my own burger. We'll see about that, Malcolm said with a slight smile. That evening, Malcolm found himself in a vinyl booth at Bernie's Diner, a place that hadn't been renovated since the 1970s and didn't seem to care. The menu was laminated and sticky. The coffee came in thick ceramic mugs. And Malcolm couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so comfortable. Ivy ordered chicken fingers and fries, then proceeded to build an elaborate structure out of her fries while Nora and Malcolm talked. Real talk, the kind that mattered. Nora told him about Ivy's father, how he'd promised to be there forever and then left when forever got complicated. How she'd spent the first year after his departure convinced she'd failed somehow, that she should have been stronger, better, enough to make him stay. But then I realized, she said, pushing her burger around her plate, that his leaving wasn't about me being insufficient. It was about him being a coward. Ivy deserved a father who loved her unconditionally, and he wasn't capable of that. Better to be alone than to have her grow up watching someone resent her for existing. That took incredible strength, Malcolm said. Or desperation. Some days I'm not sure which. Malcolm told her about his accident, details he'd never shared with anyone. How he'd woken up in the hospital unable to feel his legs, how the doctors had explained he'd severed his spinal cord, how his entire future had evaporated in the time it took to understand those words. The months of physical therapy, learning to navigate the world from a different height, different angle, different set of limitations. The people who'd disappeared from his life because his new reality made them uncomfortable. My father came to the hospital once, Malcolm said. Told me I should sell the company, live off the proceeds, stop trying to prove something that didn't need proving. He said I'd never be taken seriously in a wheelchair, that business was a contact sport and I was now benched. I told him to get out and haven't spoken to him since. That's awful, Nora breathed. It was clarifying. Showed me who really cared and who'd just been around for the image. My assistant Diane stayed. She told the board that if they tried to push me out, she'd quit and take half the staff with her. My physical therapist, Marcus, treated me like a person instead of a patient, pushed me harder than anyone else would have dared. Those are the people who mattered. The rest, I didn't need them. Is that what we are? Nora asked. People who matter? Malcolm met her eyes. You're becoming the most important people in my life. If that's okay. Nora looked away but not before he saw tears gather. I'm scared to believe that. I'm scared to let Ivy believe that. What if you change your mind? I won't. You can't promise that. You're right, I can't. But I can promise that right now in this moment, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. And tomorrow I'll probably feel the same way. And the day after that. I can't promise forever because none of us can. But I can promise now. And now is all we really have. Beside them, Ivy finished her fry tower and looked up. Mommy, are you crying? Happy tears, baby, Nora said quickly. Sometimes people cry when they're happy. Oh, then it's okay. Ivy returned to her architectural pursuits, satisfied. They left the diner an hour later, Ivy holding both their hands swinging between them like kids do. It was starting to snow, light flakes that caught in Ivy's hair and made her squeal with delight. For a moment, standing on that snowy sidewalk with Ivy's laughter filling the air and Nora's hand warm in his, Malcolm felt complete in a way he'd never experienced. Not when he'd closed his first major deal. Not when he'd made his first million. Not even before the accident when his body had worked the way bodies were supposed to. This simple moment of connection and joy. This was everything. When they reached Nora's apartment building, Ivy hugged Malcolm goodnight, her arms tight around his neck. Will you come with us when I have my surgery? She asked. I'd be less scared if you were there. Malcolm looked at Nora, who nodded slowly. I'd be honored, he said to Ivy. I'll be there for every single moment. After they went inside, Malcolm sat in his car for a long time watching the snow fall. Thomas waited patiently, used to his boss's occasional need for quiet reflection. But this wasn't reflection. This was Malcolm trying to understand how his life had changed so completely in the span of 2 weeks. How he'd gone from alone and bitter to connected and hopeful. How 2 strangers had become his reason for getting up in the morning. His phone buzzed. A text from Nora. Thank you for today. For everything. I don't know how to say what it means, so I'll just say this. You're a good man, Malcolm Prescott. Don't let anyone tell you different. Malcolm saved the text, read it 3 times and then told Thomas to drive home. He had work to do. A surgery to arrange. A life to restructure around the 2 people who'd given him purpose. The paperwork could wait until morning. Tonight he just wanted to hold on to this feeling. This sense that everything was going to be okay. That kindness and hope and love could lead anywhere, even through fear and uncertainty and the terrifying prospect of a little girl's heart surgery. Tomorrow he'd start making calls, pulling strings, ensuring Ivy had the absolute best care available. He'd clear his schedule for the surgery day, be there when Nora needed him. But tonight he'd just be grateful. Grateful for a little girl who saw the world with clear eyes and a big heart. Grateful for a woman who'd taught him to see himself differently. Grateful for the chance to matter to someone again. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in white. And Malcolm drove home through it, already counting the hours until he could see them again. The weeks leading up to Ivy's surgery passed in a rhythm Malcolm had never experienced before. His days, once filled entirely with conference calls and contract reviews, now revolved around school pickups and doctor's appointments and impromptu visits that stretched into evening hours of takeout dinner and card games on Nora's worn coffee table. He learned things he'd never thought to know. That Ivy preferred strawberry milk to chocolate. That Nora hummed while she cooked, old songs from her childhood that her grandmother had taught her. That neither of them had been to the zoo in over a year because admission plus parking cost more than Nora wanted to spend on a single afternoon. Malcolm fixed that immediately. On a Saturday morning he showed up at their apartment with tickets to the zoo, the aquarium, and a children's museum, all prepaid, non-refundable. Nora had tried to argue, but Ivy's face had lit up like Christmas morning, and Nora couldn't disappoint her daughter. At the zoo, Malcolm discovered that navigating gravel paths in a wheelchair was challenging, but not impossible, especially when Ivy insisted on riding on his lap for the rough patches, her delighted laughter making every jarring bump worthwhile. They spent an hour watching the penguins, Ivy pressing her face against the glass, convinced she could communicate with them if she tried hard enough. Nora bought them all hot chocolate from a vendor, and they drank it on a bench overlooking the seal habitat. Ivy's commentary on the seal's swimming technique providing a steady background of entertainment. That one's showing off, Ivy declared. See how he's spinning? He wants everyone to know he's the best swimmer. Maybe he's just happy, Nora suggested. Or maybe he's in love, Malcolm said, and he's trying to impress a girl seal. Ivy gasped. Do seals fall in love? Everything falls in love, Malcolm said, and over Ivy's head, he saw Nora watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Soft. Wondering. Maybe a little scared. Later, after they'd returned Ivy to the apartment for a nap she insisted she didn't need but fell into immediately, Nora and Malcolm sat in her tiny kitchen, drinking coffee that was slightly burnt because her coffee maker was on its last legs. "You need to stop," Nora said, but there was no force behind it. "Stop what?" "This. All of it. The zoo, the medical bills you won't let me see, the way you show up here every other day like you don't have an entire company to run. You're going to burn out and then what? You'll resent us for taking up so much of your time." Malcolm set down his mug carefully. "Is that what you're afraid of? That I'll resent you? I'm afraid that this is temporary. That you're playing house with us because it's novel and interesting and different from your real life. But eventually you'll remember your real life and you'll go back to it and Ivy will be devastated. I can handle being left. I've done it before. But Ivy," Nora's voice cracked. "She talks about you constantly. You're her favorite person to draw pictures for. She asks every morning if today is a Malcolm day. If you leave, it will break her. I'm not going to leave. You can't know that." Malcolm wheeled his chair closer, until their knees were almost touching. "You're right, I can't predict the future. But I can tell you this, I've been alone for 3 years. Truly alone in ways that had nothing to do with being physically by myself. I was alone in my penthouse, alone in my office, alone at charity dinners surrounded by people. I was alone because no one saw me. They saw my company or my money or my wheelchair but not me. You see me. Ivy sees me. When I'm here, I'm not alone anymore. Why would I ever willingly go back to that?" "Because this is hard," Nora said. "Ivy's surgery is in 2 weeks. It's going to be terrifying. And after the surgery there'll be recovery and complications, maybe more procedures. This isn't going to get easier, Malcolm. It's going to get harder. And I need to know if you're going to stay when it's hard." Malcolm reached out and took her hand, the gesture becoming familiar now. "I had to learn to walk again after my accident. Not walk, technically, but learn to move through the world in an entirely different way. Relearn balance, coordination, how to navigate stairs and curbs and all the places that suddenly became obstacles. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every day I wanted to quit. Every day I thought about giving up, just accepting that my life was over and I was just marking time until the end. Do you know what kept me going?" Nora shook her head. "Spite at first. Proving my father wrong. Proving everyone who'd written me off wrong. But then it became something else. It became pride. Not the bad kind, not arrogance. But the pride of knowing I was stronger than I thought. That I could endure hard things and come out the other side intact. I learned that hard doesn't mean impossible. Hard just means worth doing. And this, what we have, it's worth doing. All of it. The scary parts and the difficult parts and the parts where we don't know what's going to happen. It's worth it because you're worth it. Both of you." Tears slipped down Nora's face and she didn't bother wiping them away. "I don't know how to accept this. I've spent 3 years believing I had to do everything alone. That depending on someone was weakness. That if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, I could handle anything. And now you're here telling me I don't have to do it alone, and I don't know how to believe that." "You don't have to believe it all at once," Malcolm said gently. "Just believe it for today. Let me be here today. Tomorrow we'll deal with tomorrow." Nora's laugh was watery but real. "One day at a time? One day at a time." She squeezed his hand, then pulled away, standing to refill their coffee cups. "You're going to need to actually go to work at some point. Your assistant keeps calling me to find out where you are." "Diane calls you?" "She has my number. She wanted to coordinate your schedule around Ivy's pre-op appointments. She's very efficient. She's protective. She knows how important you both are to me." "Are we?" Nora asked, her back still turned. "Important. You're everything," Malcolm said simply. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Feelings neither of them was quite ready to name. The awareness that they were building towards something bigger than friendship, but neither wanted to rush. Not with Ivy's surgery looming. Not with so much uncertainty still ahead. Malcolm broke the silence first. "What does Ivy want to be when she grows up?" Nora turned, grateful for the subject change. "It changes every week. Last week, she wanted to be a veterinarian. This week, she wants to be an astronaut. Before that, it was a baker. We should take her to a planetarium. Show her the stars." "Malcolm. I know. I'm doing too much. But a planetarium, Nora. When would we ever regret showing her the stars?" Nora smiled despite herself. "You're impossible. I'm determined. There's a difference." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, easy conversation about nothing and everything. Malcolm told her about his mother, who'd passed away 5 years earlier, and how she taught him that kindness cost nothing but was worth everything. Nora talked about her nursing program, how hard she'd worked to get through it as a single mother, taking classes at night while her mom watched Ivy, studying between shifts, refusing to give up even when exhaustion made her want to quit. "You're the strongest person I know," Malcolm said. "I don't feel strong. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what strength is. Holding it together when everything's falling apart." When Ivy woke from her nap, she wandered into the kitchen, hair mussed and cheek marked with pillow creases. "Is Malcolm still here?" she asked sleepily. "I'm still here," Malcolm confirmed. Ivy climbed into his lap without asking permission, curling against his chest. "Good. I like when you're here. It feels safer." Over her head, Malcolm met Nora's eyes. The look they shared said everything words couldn't. This was real. This mattered. And no matter how scary the next few weeks would be, they'd face it together. The following Tuesday, Malcolm cleared his entire schedule and took Nora and Ivy to the planetarium. They sat in the dark theater, watching stars wheel across the dome ceiling while a narrator talked about galaxies and black holes and the infinite nature of space. Ivy was mesmerized, her small hand gripping Malcolm's, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, there are billions of stars," she whispered. "Billions. I know, baby. And we're just one little planet around one little star. But we matter, right? Even though we're small?" "We matter," Nora said firmly. "Size doesn't determine importance." "Malcolm, do you think when my heart gets fixed I'll be able to be an astronaut?" Malcolm felt his throat tighten. "I think you can be anything you want to be. Your heart doesn't define what you're capable of." After the show, they walked through the museum's exhibits, Ivy asking 1,000 questions about rockets and satellites and whether dogs in space got homesick. Malcolm answered what he could and made up the rest, and Nora laughed more freely than he'd ever heard her laugh before. In the gift shop, Ivy fell in love with a stuffed animal of a star, bright yellow with a smiling face. Malcolm bought it for her over Nora's protests, watching as Ivy hugged it like it was the most precious thing in the world. "What are you going to name it?" Malcolm asked. Ivy thought for a moment, then smiled. "Hope. Because stars give us hope when it's dark." Malcolm looked at Nora and saw his own emotion reflected in her face. This child. This incredible, brave, wise child who saw the world with such clarity. How had they gotten so lucky to be part of her life? That night, as they walked to the car, Ivy holding her star and chattering about which planets she wanted to visit first, Malcolm felt something settle in his chest. Purpose. Direction. Home. These two people, this little makeshift family they were building, this was what he'd been missing. This was what made all the hard days worth enduring. Nora must have sensed his mood because she reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "Thank you for today. She'll remember this forever." "So will I," Malcolm said. The days continued to pass, each one bringing them closer to the surgery date. Malcolm arranged everything. The best surgical team. A private recovery room at Memorial. He even had his penthouse prepared, converting one of the spare bedrooms into a recovery space for Ivy, complete with every comfort he could think of. When he told Nora, she'd started to argue, then stopped. "You're doing it again," she'd said, making it impossible to say no. "Is that a yes?" "That's a thank you, and I don't know how to repay you." "You already have. Every day you repay me by letting me be part of this. By trusting me with Ivy. By seeing me as more than my limitations or my bank account. That's payment enough." The night before the surgery, Malcolm couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that could go wrong. 95% success rate meant 5% failure. 5% chance that tomorrow would be the worst day of their lives. 5% chance he'd have to watch Nora's world end and be powerless to stop it. His phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. A text from Nora. "Are you awake?" "Yes." "Can't stop thinking." "Me neither. I'm terrified." "I know. I am too." A pause, then, "Can you come over? I don't want to be alone and Ivy's sleeping. I just need someone to sit with me." Malcolm was out of bed and dressed in minutes. Thomas drove him through empty streets to Nora's apartment, where she met him at the door in pajama pants and one of her nursing scrubs tops, eyes red from crying she'd been doing alone. They sat on her couch, close but not touching, and talked through the fear. Malcolm held her when she broke down, when the weight of everything became too much and she sobbed against his shoulder. He let her be strong and weak in turns, knowing she needed permission for both. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Malcolm said as dawn began to lighten the sky, "we face it together. You're not alone anymore, Nora. I promise you that." "I'm starting to believe you," she whispered. And as they sat there, waiting for the sun to rise on the scariest day of their lives, Malcolm sent up a prayer to whoever might be listening. Keep her safe. Keep Ivy safe. Let tomorrow be the beginning of their story, not the end. The universe, as it turned out, was listening. The hospital waiting room at Memorial Children's was designed to be comforting. Soft lighting, chairs that didn't quite manage to be comfortable despite their padding, magazines no one could focus on reading, and a television playing morning news at low volume. Malcolm sat beside Nora, their chairs pushed together, his hand holding hers so tightly he worried about cutting off circulation. On Nora's other side, her mother Diane Wilson had arrived at dawn, a sturdy woman in her early 50s who'd hugged Malcolm like she'd known him for years and thanked him for taking care of her girls. You didn't have to do all this, Diane had said, gesturing at the private surgical suite, the team of specialists, the accommodations Malcolm had arranged. But I'm grateful you did. Thank you for loving them. The word love had hung in the air between them, neither confirmed nor denied. But it was true. Malcolm knew it was true, even if he and Nora hadn't spoken it aloud yet. Ivy had been brave that morning. Terrifyingly brave. She'd held Hope the Star close as the nurses prepped her for surgery, asked questions about what the doctors would do, and only cried a little when they'd placed the 4. Malcolm had been allowed to wheel right up beside her bed, holding her hand while the anesthesiologist explained what would happen. You're going to count backward from 10, the doctor had said, and before you get to 1 you'll be asleep. And when you wake up, your heart will be all fixed and you'll feel so much better. Will it hurt? Ivy had asked, her voice small. You'll be asleep so you won't feel anything during the surgery. After, you might feel sore but we have medicine to help with that. And your mom and Malcolm will be right there when you wake up. Promise? Malcolm had leaned close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I promise. We'll be the first faces you see. Okay. I'm brave. I can do this. You're the bravest person I know, Malcolm had said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They'd watched her count backward, her voice getting slower, softer. 10, 9, 8. Her eyes had fluttered. 7, 6. And then she was asleep, her hand going slack in Malcolm's grip. The nurses had gently moved them back, wheeling Ivy toward the operating room, and Nora had made a sound like something breaking. That was 2 hours ago. Dr. Okonkwo had said the surgery would take 3 to 4 hours, depending on what they found once they were inside. Every minute felt like an eternity. Nora hadn't spoken since they'd returned to the waiting room. She sat rigid, staring at nothing, her lips moving in what Malcolm recognized as prayer. Her mother kept trying to coax her to eat or drink something, but Nora refused. Malcolm didn't push. He just stayed close, his presence a silent promise that she wasn't alone. At the 3-hour mark, Malcolm's phone buzzed. Diane, his assistant, checking in. He told her about the surgery and she'd immediately cleared his calendar for the week, handled the board meeting he was supposed to attend, and sent flowers to Ivy's hospital room for when she woke up. Malcolm texted back a quick update, then silenced his phone completely. The business world could wait. This was more important. Nora's mother, Diane Wilson, tried to fill the silence with stories about Ivy as a baby, about Nora's own childhood. She was always stubborn, Mrs. Wilson said fondly. Even as a little girl. Once she decided something, that was it. No changing her mind. When her father walked out, I thought it would break her. But she just set her jaw and said, fine. We don't need him. And she made it true through sheer willpower. She's remarkable, Malcolm said. She is. And she's been alone too long. I'm glad she has you now. Malcolm glanced at Nora, who didn't react to her mother's words. I'm glad I have her. 3.5 hours in, a nurse came to update them. Surgery was going well. Dr. Okonkwo was closing up now. Everything looked good. Ivy was stable. Another hour, maybe less, and they could see her. Nora's breath came out in a rush, the first real reaction she'd shown in hours. She's okay? She's doing great, the nurse confirmed with a warm smile. Dr. Okonkwo will come talk to you soon with all the details. After the nurse left, Nora turned to Malcolm and buried her face in his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling her shake with relief and residual fear and exhaustion. She's okay, Nora whispered. She's okay. She's okay, Malcolm echoed. 40 minutes later, Dr. Okonkwo appeared in her surgical scrubs, pulling off her cap to reveal hair damp with sweat. But she was smiling, and that smile was everything. The surgery was a complete success, she said, sitting down across from them. The defect was exactly where the imaging showed it. We patched it with synthetic material that will integrate with her heart tissue over time. Her heart is already pumping more efficiently. She came through beautifully. She's in recovery now, still sleeping off the anesthesia, but she should wake up in the next hour or so. Nora's hands covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She's really okay? She's really okay. The next few days will be about managing pain and monitoring for complications, but I'm very optimistic. She's young, strong, and she came through without any issues. I expect a full recovery. When can we see her? Give the recovery staff about 20 minutes to get her settled, and then you can sit with her. She'll probably be groggy and confused when she first wakes up, but that's normal. Just be there, talk to her, let her know she's safe. That's what she'll need most. After Dr. Okonkwo left, Nora collapsed back in her chair, all the tension draining out of her at once. Her mother hugged her tight, both of them crying. Malcolm gave them space, wheeling back slightly, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. Ivy was okay. The surgery was successful. The 5% failure had been avoided. The universe had been kind. 20 minutes later, a nurse led them to the recovery area. Ivy lay in a bed that looked too big for her small body, covered in blankets, surrounded by monitors that beeped steadily. Her face was pale, an oxygen tube under her nose, but she was breathing on her own. Malcolm positioned his wheelchair on one side of the bed while Nora took the other side, her mother standing at the foot. "Hi, baby," Nora said softly, stroking Ivy's hair. "Mommy's here. You did so good. You were so brave." Ivy's eyes fluttered but didn't open. Her hand twitched, and Malcolm gently took it in his, careful of the 4-line. "Malcolm's here too," Nora continued. "Just like we promised. We're both here and we're so proud of you." It took another 10 minutes before Ivy's eyes finally opened, unfocused and confused. "Mommy? I'm here, sweetheart. It's over? The surgery's over? It's all over. Dr. Okonkwo fixed your heart. You're going to be just fine." Ivy's gaze wandered until it found Malcolm. A small smile touched her lips. "You stayed. I told you I would. My chest hurts." "I know, baby," Nora said. "The doctors are giving you medicine for that. It'll get better soon." "Hope," Ivy said suddenly. "Where's Hope?" Mrs. Wilson quickly retrieved the stuffed star from the chair where she'd been keeping it safe. She tucked it under Ivy's arm and the little girl relaxed, holding her star close. "Stars give us hope when it's dark," Ivy mumbled, her eyes already closing again. "You told me that, Malcolm." "You told me that," Malcolm corrected gently. "You're the wise one." But Ivy was already asleep again, exhausted from the trauma her small body had endured. They sat with her for the next hour, watching her sleep, monitoring every breath, every beep of the machines. Malcolm felt something in his chest that he couldn't quite name. Profound relief mixed with fierce protectiveness. This child had become his. Not legally, not officially, but in every way that mattered. Her pain was his pain. Her recovery would be his focus. Her future happiness was now tied to his own. Nora seemed to sense his thoughts because she reached across the bed and took his hand. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything. For being here. For making this possible. For caring about her, about us. I don't know what we did to deserve you, but I'm so grateful." "You gave me a reason," Malcolm said. "That's more than I've had in a long time." As evening fell, Mrs. Wilson went to get food from the cafeteria, insisting that they needed to eat even though neither of them felt hungry. Alone with Ivy sleeping between them, Nora looked at Malcolm with an expression he'd been seeing more and more lately. Soft, open, vulnerable in a way she hadn't been before. "Malcolm, I need to tell you something." "Okay. I'm falling in love with you. I've been fighting it because I was scared, because trusting someone again felt impossible. But today, sitting here watching you love my daughter like she's yours, I can't fight it anymore. I love you. And that terrifies me, but it's true." Malcolm felt his heart, his perfectly functioning heart, skip a beat. "Nora. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. Because after today, after seeing how close we came to losing her, I realized that life's too short not to tell people how you feel. So I'm telling you. I love you, Malcolm Prescott. I love how kind you are. I love how you see people for who they are instead of what they can do for you. I love how you've never once made me feel like a charity case or a project. I love that you make my daughter laugh. I love that you're here, right now, when you could be anywhere else. I just love you." Malcolm wheeled closer to her side of the bed, close enough that he could reach up and cup her face in his hands. "I love you too. I've loved you since the first day in that cafe when you chose kindness over convenience. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you hum when you cook. I love how you've taught Ivy to see the world with compassion and curiosity. I love that you let me into your life even though I know how hard that was. I love everything about you, Nora Wilson. Everything. They kissed then, over Ivy's sleeping form, a gentle kiss that tasted of tears and relief and the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. So what now? Nora asked. Now we take care of Ivy. We get her through recovery. And then we figure out the rest together. As a family. A family, Nora repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. So do I. Ivy slept through the night, waking periodically in pain or confusion but settling quickly when she saw her mother and Malcolm nearby. The nursing staff was excellent, attentive without being intrusive, managing Ivy's pain and monitoring her vitals. Dr. Okonkwo stopped by twice, checking the surgical site, adjusting medications, expressing satisfaction with Ivy's progress. By morning, Ivy was more alert, asking for juice and crackers, complaining that the hospital gown was itchy. All signs, Dr. Okonkwo assured them, of a child recovering well. Malcolm had his assistant bring him fresh clothes and his laptop. He set up a makeshift office in Ivy's room, handling urgent emails between reading stories to Ivy and making sure Nora ate regular meals. Mrs. Wilson came and went, bringing food and moral support, marveling at how quickly her granddaughter was bouncing back. On the second day post-surgery, Ivy was sitting up in bed, coloring a picture of the solar system, when she looked at Malcolm and asked, "When I get out of the hospital, can I come stay at your castle?" Malcolm laughed. "I don't have a castle, remember? Just a regular apartment. But yes, you and your mom are going to stay with me while you recover. I have a room all set up for you. With windows. With big windows that overlook the city. You can see all the buildings and cars and lights. Like stars but on the ground? Exactly like that." Ivy returned to her coloring, satisfied. Across the room, Nora mouthed thank you to Malcolm and he smiled. This was his life now. Hospital rooms and coloring books and making sure a 5-year-old had everything she needed to heal. It was so far from boardrooms and profit margins and the life he'd built before. But it was better. So much better. On day 3, Dr. Okonkwo cleared Ivy for discharge. She's doing remarkably well. Continue the pain medication as prescribed, no strenuous activity for 6 weeks, follow-up appointment in 2 weeks. But she's cleared to go home. Or in this case to Malcolm's place. They left the hospital in the afternoon, Ivy in a wheelchair even though she insisted she could walk, holding Hope the Star and wearing a brand new purple sweater Malcolm had Diane buy for her. Thomas brought the car around and Malcolm supervised getting Ivy settled safely in the back seat, making sure every belt was secure, every comfort was accounted for. Mrs. Wilson hugged her daughter tight before they left. "Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. And Malcolm, you take good care of my girls." "I will," Malcolm promised. "I absolutely will." As Thomas drove them across the city to Malcolm's penthouse, Ivy chattered about what she wanted to see first, whether Malcolm had any pets. He didn't but was considering getting a cat if Ivy wanted one, and what they should have for dinner. Nora held Malcolm's hand in the back seat, their fingers interlaced and exchanged quiet smiles. They'd made it through the hardest part. Ivy was okay. They were together. And whatever came next, they'd face it as a family. The family Malcolm had never expected to have but now couldn't imagine living without. Love, it turned out, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up. Being present. Choosing each other every day, especially on the hard days. And as Malcolm looked at the two people who'd changed his entire world, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd choose them every single day for the rest of his life. Malcolm's penthouse had always been a showcase rather than a home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the city skyline. Modern furniture in neutral tones, chosen by an interior designer. Art on the walls that cost more than most people's cars. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and completely impersonal. But in the 3 weeks since Nora and Ivy had moved in temporarily for recovery, the space had transformed. Ivy's coloring pages covered the refrigerator. A basket of toys sat in the corner of the living room. Children's books were stacked on the coffee table. Nora's nursing scrubs hung in the laundry room. The kitchen smelled like home cooking instead of takeout containers. The television, which Malcolm rarely used, was frequently tuned to children's educational programs about animals or space. And everywhere there was laughter. Ivy's recovery had gone smoothly. Her incision was healing well, the pain manageable with medication that they'd gradually been reducing. She tired easily and couldn't run or jump yet, but she could walk around the penthouse, explore the rooms, press her face against the windows and count the cars below. Dr. Okonkwo's 2-week follow-up had been excellent. Everything was progressing exactly as hoped. But more than Ivy's physical recovery, Malcolm watched as their little family unit solidified. Morning routines developed. Nora woke first, made coffee, started breakfast. Malcolm would join her, and they'd talk quietly while Ivy slept, sharing the newspaper, planning the day. When Ivy woke, she'd climb into Malcolm's lap for morning cuddles before breakfast. After eating, they'd do her physical therapy exercises together, gentle movements to rebuild strength, then perhaps a movie or coloring or board games. Nora had returned to work part-time, and on those days Malcolm worked from home, his laptop set up at the dining table while Ivy played nearby. Thomas had become Uncle Thomas, driving Ivy to her appointments and always keeping peppermints in his pocket for her. Diane, Malcolm's assistant, regularly video called to check on Ivy's progress and always made her laugh by making funny faces on camera. Even Malcolm's cleaning service had been charmed by Ivy, the team lead bringing her a small plant for her room, telling her it would grow as she grew stronger. It was during Ivy's 3rd week of recovery that Malcolm realized he didn't want this to be temporary. He was reading to Ivy before her afternoon nap, a story about a brave rabbit who went on adventures. Nora was at work, and the penthouse was quiet except for Malcolm's voice and Ivy's occasional questions about the story. When he finished the book, Ivy snuggled deeper into her pillows and said, "Malcolm, I like living here. Can we stay forever?" Malcolm's heart clenched. "Would you want to?" "Yes. It's nice here. And you're here. And Mommy's happier. She smiles more now. I think it's because of you. Your mom makes me happy too. Then we should all stay together. That makes sense, right?" "It makes perfect sense to me, sweetheart." That evening, after Ivy was asleep and Nora had returned from her shift at the hospital, Malcolm broached the subject carefully. They were sitting on the couch, Nora's feet in his lap, both tired but content. "Ivy asked me today if you could stay here permanently," Malcolm said. "What would you think about that?" Nora's expression became guarded, the walls going up that she'd been slowly lowering over the past weeks. "Malcolm, we've been over this. We can't keep accepting so much from you." "Why not?" "Because it's not fair. Because eventually you'll want your space back, your life back, and we'll be in the way." "You're not in the way. You're the point. This whole place only makes sense now because you're in it. Before, it was just expensive emptiness. Now it's home. This is your home. A very expensive home that we couldn't afford in 100 years. Eventually, reality will come back. I'll need to find a new apartment, something in my price range, get Ivy enrolled in school near there. We can't just play house forever." Malcolm wheeled his chair to face her directly. "What if it's not playing? What if this is real? What if I want you and Ivy here permanently, not as guests but as family?" "Malcolm, hear me out. Your lease is up next month. You've been dreading going back to that apartment, I can tell. The stairs are difficult, the neighborhood isn't as safe as you'd like, and it's far from Ivy's school. What if instead of renewing you stayed here? Both of you. I have the space. I want you here. And more importantly, I want to be part of your lives in a real, permanent way." Nora shook her head. "It's too much. You're asking us to depend on you completely, and that's terrifying. What if something changes? What if you change your mind?" "I won't." "You can't promise that." "Watch me." "Nora Wilson, I am promising you right now that I will not change my mind. I love you. I love Ivy. This isn't some temporary thing for me. This is the life I want. The only life I want." Tears welled in Nora's eyes. "You say that now, but nothing. I'm not Ivy's father. I'm not the man who walked away when things got difficult. I'm the man who sat through a terrifying surgery, who learned to braid hair even though I have no coordination for it, who canceled board meetings to take a 5-year-old to the planetarium. I'm the man who wants to wake up every morning and see you both. Who wants to be there for every doctor's appointment, every school play, every milestone. I'm not going anywhere, Nora. The only question is whether you'll let me stay." Nora wiped at her eyes, her defenses crumbling. "I'm scared. I'm so scared of believing this is real and then losing it." "I'm scared too," Malcolm admitted. "I'm scared I'm not enough. That I can't be the father figure Ivy deserves, the partner you need. That my limitations will become frustrating or burdensome. But I'd rather be scared and trying than safe and alone. Wouldn't you?" "You're always enough," Nora said fiercely. "You're more than enough. You've been more of a father to Ivy in 2 months than her biological father ever was. And as for limitations, the only limitations I see are the ones you place on yourself. You're one of the strongest people I know. Then stay. Both of you. Make this your home. Let me take care of you not because you can't take care of yourselves, but because I want to. Because love means sharing burdens, sharing joys, building a life together. Stay, Nora. Please. Nora looked around the penthouse, at the evidence of their lives blending together, at the home they'd accidentally created. Ivy loves it here, she said slowly. She told me yesterday that she feels safe here. That she doesn't worry as much because you're always there. And I. She paused, meeting Malcolm's eyes. I haven't felt this settled in years. Like I can finally breathe because I'm not carrying everything alone anymore. So is that a yes? It's a yes, Nora said, smiling through her tears. We'll stay. God help us both, we'll stay. Malcolm pulled her close, kissing her deeply, feeling like everything in his life had suddenly aligned. This was right. This was what he'd been moving toward since the moment a little girl had asked why he looked sad. That night, after they'd celebrated with ice cream and told Ivy the news, who'd shrieked with joy and insisted on a group hug that lasted 5 full minutes, Malcolm lay in bed thinking about the future. They'd need to make this official somehow. He wanted to give Nora an actual space in his company, wanted to set up trust funds for Ivy's education, wanted to ensure they were protected no matter what happened. Tomorrow he'd call his lawyer and start making arrangements. But more than the practical matters, Malcolm wanted to be the kind of partner and father figure these two deserved. He'd have to learn, grow, figure out how to navigate the complicated waters of parenting and partnership. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be disagreements and tough days and moments when he questioned whether he was doing the right thing. But that was okay. That was life. Messy, complicated, beautiful life. The next morning, Malcolm woke to find Ivy sitting cross-legged at the foot of his bed, watching him with her characteristic directness. Good morning, he said, pushing himself up. You're awake early. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about us all living here forever, and it made me too happy to sleep. Malcolm's heart melted. Come here. Ivy crawled up beside him, tucking herself under his arm. Malcolm, can I ask you something? Always. Are you going to marry my mommy? Malcolm blinked, not expecting quite that level of directness this early in the morning. Would you like that? Yes. Because if you marry her, then you'd be my daddy for real. And I'd like that very much. I mean, you're already kind of my daddy. You do all the daddy things. But it would be official. What are the daddy things I do? Ivy counted on her fingers. You read me stories. You make sure I'm safe. You play games with me even when you're tired. You hold mommy's hand and make her smile. You came to my surgery. You help me with my exercises. You let me watch my shows even though I know they're boring for grown-ups. You love us. That's what daddies do. Malcolm felt his eyes burn with tears. You're right. That is what daddies do. And I do love you, Ivy. So much. So will you marry mommy? Please? I would like that very much. But I need to ask her first, okay? And when I do, I want it to be special. Ivy's eyes went wide. Like in the movies? With flowers and getting on one knee? Except you can't really get on one knee because of your chair, so maybe just with flowers and a pretty ring? Something like that. Can I help pick the ring? Malcolm laughed. I think that would be perfect. Later that week, while Nora was at work and Ivy was having a video call with her grandmother, Malcolm met with his jeweler. He'd been thinking about this since the conversation with Ivy, but really he'd been thinking about it since he'd admitted he loved Nora. He wanted to marry her. Wanted to build an official, legal family. Wanted Ivy to have his last name if Nora agreed. Wanted the world to know these were his people. The jeweler showed him dozens of rings, but Malcolm kept coming back to one in particular. Simple. Elegant. A single diamond on a platinum band, nothing flashy or ostentatious. It looked like something Nora would actually wear, something practical and beautiful and enduring. This one, Malcolm said. Excellent choice, Mr. Prescott. When do you need it? As soon as possible. 3 days later, Malcolm had the ring. Now he just needed the right moment. It came on a Saturday morning, bright and clear, unusually warm for late autumn. Ivy was well enough now for short walks, and Malcolm suggested they go to the park near the cafe where he and Nora had first met. They packed a picnic, bundled Ivy in her purple sweater, and took Thomas to drive them. The park was beautiful, trees showing their final autumn colors before winter stripped them bare. They found a spot near a small pond where ducks paddled lazily. Malcolm spread out a blanket while Nora set up their lunch. Ivy threw breadcrumbs to the ducks, narrating their behavior with her characteristic intensity. That one's definitely in charge, she announced. See how he takes the biggest pieces? He's the duck boss. Malcolm and Nora sat close together on the blanket watching Ivy, both thinking the same thing. This is what happiness looks like. After lunch, Ivy asked if she could walk around the pond with Thomas, who'd been sitting patiently nearby. Just to the other side and back, she promised. I won't run. Nora agreed, and suddenly Malcolm was alone with her, the moment he'd been waiting for presenting itself naturally. Nora, he started, then stopped, nervous in a way he hadn't been nervous since before his accident. I want to ask you something. She turned to him, and something in his expression must have tipped her off because her eyes went wide. Malcolm. The last 2 months have been the best of my life. Not despite everything that's happened, but because of it. Because of you. Because you saw me when I felt invisible. Because you let me into your life even though it would have been easier to walk away. Because you taught me what love actually means. It's not about grand romantic gestures or sweeping someone off their feet. It's about showing up. Being present. Choosing someone every single day. And I choose you, Nora. Every day for the rest of my life, I choose you. Malcolm pulled out the ring box, opening it to show her the simple, perfect ring inside. I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other a short time. But I also know that I've never been more certain of anything. I love you. I love Ivy. I want to marry you, adopt Ivy if you'll let me build a real family together. Not because you need me, but because I need you. Because life with you is better than any life I could imagine without you. So, Nora Wilson, will you marry me? Tears streamed down Nora's face, but she was smiling, laughing through the tears. You're crazy, she said. Absolutely crazy. Is that a yes? Yes. Yes, of course it's yes. I love you, Malcolm. I want to marry you. I want Ivy to have you as her father, legally and officially. I want all of it. Every single bit of it. Malcolm slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Nora threw her arms around him, kissing him like the world was ending and beginning all at once. When they pulled apart, both laughing and crying, they saw Ivy running back toward them, Thomas following at a more sedate pace. Did you ask her? Ivy yelled. Did she say yes? She said yes, Malcolm confirmed. Ivy launched herself at both of them, and they all ended up in a tangle on the blanket, hugging and laughing. Thomas, ever professional, took a photo with Nora's phone, capturing the moment forever. 3 people who'd found each other against all odds, choosing to build a life together, proving that love and kindness and hope could lead to the most unexpected, beautiful places. Later, as they drove home, Ivy sandwiched between Malcolm and Nora in the back seat, she looked up at Malcolm and said, Now you're going to be my daddy for real. I already am, Malcolm said. But now everyone will know it. And truly he was. Not because of genetics or legal documents, though those would come. But because he'd chosen her. Chosen to love a little girl with a healing heart, a woman who taught him to see differently, and a life that was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. At a red light, Malcolm caught Thomas's eye in the rearview mirror. His driver, who'd been with him through the accident and recovery and lonely years, was smiling. Congratulations, Mr. Prescott, Thomas said. You found your family. I did, Malcolm agreed. I really did. Malcolm had been so focused on his personal life that he'd missed the warning signs in his professional one. It started with a late-night phone call from Diane, his assistant, her voice tight with concern. Malcolm, we have a problem. Bradford Technologies filed paperwork for a hostile takeover bid. They're going after controlling shares, using your recent absences and focus on personal matters as evidence that you're not fit to lead the company anymore. Malcolm sat up in bed, careful not to wake Nora sleeping beside him. Bradford? Robert Bradford specifically? Yes. He's convinced several board members that the company needs new leadership. Someone who's, quote, fully committed to the company's future. They're painting you as distracted, using your wheelchair and your new family as proof that you can't handle the demands of the position. Rage, pure and hot, flooded through Malcolm. Robert Bradford was a competitor he'd clashed with before, a ruthless businessman who saw any perceived weakness as an opening. And apparently Malcolm's happiness, his new family, his relationship with Nora and Ivy, those were all weaknesses to be exploited. Schedule an emergency board meeting, Malcolm said, his voice cold. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I don't care what anyone has planned. This ends now. The next morning, Malcolm woke earlier than usual, his mind already spinning through strategies and counterarguments. Nora noticed immediately. You're tense, she said, tracing patterns on his shoulder. What's wrong? He told her everything. The takeover attempt. The board members questioning his leadership. The way Bradford was using his disability and his relationship with them as ammunition. Nora's expression hardened in a way Malcolm had rarely seen. They're using us against you? Using Ivy and me as reasons you can't do your job? They're using everything they can. It's business. It's ugly, but it's how these things work. It's not just business when they're attacking you personally. When they're implying that caring about your family makes you weak. Nora sat up, fully awake now. What are you going to do? Fight. I built this company from nothing. I'm not letting Bradford or anyone else take it just because I finally found something more important than profit margins. More important than the company? Nora's voice was soft. You and Ivy are more important than anything. But that doesn't mean I can't have both. I can run a successful company and be a good partner and father. They're not mutually exclusive. Then prove it to them. Show them exactly who you are and what you're capable of. Malcolm dressed with extra care that morning, putting on his most expensive suit, the one that he'd worn to close his biggest deal. Armor for the battle ahead. Thomas drove him to his office building, a gleaming tower downtown that bore his company's name. Diane met him at the entrance with a briefcase full of documents and a determined expression. I've prepared everything you'll need, she said as they rode the elevator to the top floor. Financial reports, growth projections, every single success the company's had under your leadership. I also compiled a list of every board member's concerns and prepared counterarguments. You're going to walk in there and remind them exactly why you're the CEO. The boardroom was already full when Malcolm arrived. 12 board members sat around the massive conference table, Robert Bradford at the far end, looking smug and confident. He was everything Malcolm despised in business. Ruthless without ethics, successful without compassion, wealthy without generosity. Malcolm, Bradford said, his tone dripping false concern. Thank you for joining us. I know you've been preoccupied lately. Malcolm wheeled himself to the head of the table, the position of power he'd occupied for 5 years. Let's cut through the pleasantries, Robert. You're attempting a hostile takeover of my company, using my personal life as justification. So let's address that directly. What exactly is your concern? That I've been spending time with my family? That I've found purpose beyond this boardroom? Or is it simply that you see an opportunity to steal what I've built and you're taking it? Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Good. They should be uncomfortable. Bradford leaned back in his chair. Your recent decisions suggest divided priorities. You've missed meetings, delegated crucial negotiations, taken days off for personal matters. The company requires leadership that's fully committed. I've missed 3 meetings in 2 months, Malcolm said calmly. All 3 were rescheduled with full notice, and Diane attended in my place with my complete authorization. I delegated 1 negotiation, which closed successfully under terms better than I would have achieved myself. And I took 4 days off for the first time in 5 years, 3 of which were spent in a hospital during my daughter's heart surgery. Now, someone explain to me how any of that suggests I'm incapable of running this company. Your daughter? One of the board members, Helen Carter, asked. I thought you weren't married? I'm engaged. And in the process of adopting my fiancé's daughter. But that's not relevant to my performance as CEO. It's completely relevant, Bradford interjected. You're taking on significant personal responsibilities at a time when the company needs your full attention. We're in the middle of several major expansions, negotiating critical contracts. This isn't the time for distraction. Malcolm pulled out his tablet, projecting the screen onto the boardroom display. Let's talk about results, shall we? In the 2 months since I met my fiancée and her daughter, our stock price has increased 7%. We closed the Morrison deal, which Robert himself said was impossible. We secured 3 new major contracts. Our employee satisfaction ratings are at an all-time high. Our quarterly profits exceeded projections by 12%. Now, someone explain to me exactly how my so-called distractions are hurting this company. The silence was telling. Bradford's smug expression faltered. Malcolm continued, his voice firm. I want to address something directly. Some of you have concerns about my disability. You think a man in a wheelchair can't effectively lead a company. Let me be clear, I have led this company for 3 years since my accident. In those 3 years we've grown by 40%, expanded into 5 new markets, and increased our workforce by 30%. My wheelchair doesn't limit my ability to think, strategize, negotiate, or lead. What it does is give me perspective that most CEOs lack. I understand adaptability because I've had to adapt to a new way of living. I understand resilience because I've rebuilt my life from the ground up. And I understand compassion because I've experienced firsthand how people judge you based on limitations rather than capabilities. Helen Carter spoke up. Malcolm, no one is questioning your abilities. But Robert raises valid concerns about divided attention. Can you honestly say that having a family won't impact your dedication to this company? Helen, do you have children? Yes, 2. And would you say that having those children has made you less effective in your role as chief financial officer? Of course not. If anything, it's made me more efficient. Exactly. Having a family doesn't diminish my ability to lead. It enhances it. It gives me something to work for beyond just profit. It reminds me that this company employs 3,000 people, 3,000 individuals with families and lives and dreams. That's not a distraction. That's purpose. Malcolm wheeled around the table, making eye contact with each board member. I know what Robert is doing. He's trying to exploit any perceived weakness to take what I've built. And if you let him succeed, you're not just betraying me. You're betraying every employee who's worked hard to make this company successful. You're saying that personal happiness is incompatible with professional excellence. You're saying that a man in a wheelchair, or a man with a family, or a man who dares to have a life outside this building, isn't worthy of leadership. Is that really the message you want to send? Another board member, James Liu, cleared his throat. Malcolm makes valid points. His performance hasn't declined. If anything, he seems more focused lately. Because I am, Malcolm said. For 3 years, I poured everything into this company because I had nothing else. I worked 16-hour days because going home to an empty penthouse was depressing. I measured my worth entirely by quarterly earnings because I had no other metric for success. And yes, the company grew. But I was miserable. Now I have balance. I have reasons to be efficient, to delegate effectively, to build systems that don't require me to sacrifice my entire life. And the company is thriving because of it, not despite it. Bradford stood, slamming his hand on the table. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Malcolm is openly admitting that the company isn't his priority anymore. I'm admitting that the company isn't my only priority, Malcolm corrected. There's a difference. A company led by someone with no life outside work isn't sustainable. It leads to burnout, poor decisions, and lack of innovation. Ask anyone in this room if they'd be better leaders if they gave up their families, their hobbies, their personal lives. No one would say yes. So why am I being held to a different standard? The room fell silent again. Malcolm could see the calculations happening behind various board members' eyes. They were weighing loyalty against opportunity, ethics against profit. I'm not asking you to choose between me and Robert, Malcolm said quietly. I'm asking you to choose what kind of company you want this to be. One that values human beings and understands that leaders are people with complex lives? Or one that sacrifices everything, including humanity, at the altar of profit? Robert can offer you ruthless efficiency. I can offer you sustainable growth built on a foundation of respect for every person who walks through these doors. Your choice. Bradford's face had turned red. You're being emotional, Malcolm. Making this personal when it's just business. It became personal when you used my disability and my family as weapons against me. But fine, let's talk business. Robert, what's your proposal for the Jennings account? Bradford blinked, caught off guard. What? The Jennings account. Major client, currently negotiating renewal. What's your strategy? I'd need to review the file. I don't need to review the file. Jennings wants a 15% discount and expanded services. I'm offering 10% and partial expansion, with a promise to revisit in 6 months based on performance metrics. He'll accept because he values long-term partnership over short-term savings. That's the kind of detailed knowledge I have about every major account, every ongoing negotiation, every aspect of this company. Can you say the same, Robert? Or are you just trying to steal something you couldn't build yourself? The hostile takeover attempt fell apart after that. Board members who'd been wavering came firmly back to Malcolm's side. Helen Carter moved to officially reject Bradford's bid, and the motion passed 10-2. Bradford stormed out, making vague threats about legal action that everyone knew would go nowhere. He'd lost and he knew it. After the meeting, Diane hugged Malcolm tightly. That was amazing. You destroyed him. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's enough. Malcolm spent the rest of the day in meetings, reassuring clients, smoothing over relationships, ensuring that the attempted takeover hadn't damaged the company's reputation. It was exhausting work but necessary. By the time he left the office at 6, he was drained but victorious. At home, Nora had dinner waiting. Ivy was coloring at the kitchen table, chattering about her day at school, which she'd recently returned to part-time as she continued recovering. The normalcy of it, the simple domestic beauty, hit Malcolm like a wave. You're home, Nora said, kissing him. How did it go? We won. Bradford's out. The board is back on my side. I never doubted it for a second. That night, after Ivy was asleep, Malcolm and Nora sat on the couch, exhausted but content. I meant what I said today, Malcolm told her. About you and Ivy being more important than the company. If I had to choose, I'd choose you every time. I know. But you shouldn't have to choose. You can have both. You deserve both. Bradford called me emotional. Said I was making it personal. Good. Business should be personal. It should involve real people with real feelings. That's not weakness, Malcolm. That's strength. Malcolm pulled her close. Thank you for believing in me. For standing by me. For reminding me that having a life outside work isn't a liability. Always, Nora said. You're stuck with us now. The weeks following the attempted takeover were busy but manageable. Malcolm restructured his schedule, delegating more effectively, building a stronger team around him so that his presence wasn't required at every meeting. He hired a new COO, someone he trusted completely, who could handle day-to-day operations while Malcolm focused on strategy and the aspects of the business he was most passionate about. The result was remarkable. The company continued to grow, but Malcolm's stress levels decreased. He was home for dinner most nights. He attended Ivy's school events. He and Nora had actual date nights, leaving Ivy with her grandmother while they explored the city together, rediscovering what it meant to simply be a couple. One evening, about a month after the boardroom confrontation, Malcolm received a phone call from Helen Carter. Malcolm, I wanted to apologize, she said without preamble. I should have shut down Bradford's attempt immediately. The fact that I even considered his arguments, that I questioned your commitment, that was wrong. You've proven time and again that you're an exceptional leader, and your personal life only makes you better at it. Thank you, Helen. That means a lot. I also wanted to tell you something. After that board meeting, after watching you defend not just your position but your right to have a full life, I went home and had a long conversation with my husband. I realized I'd been doing exactly what Bradford accused you of, sacrificing my family for work. I'd missed my daughter's last 3 soccer games. I'd canceled family dinners for conference calls. I was so afraid of being seen as less committed because I'm a woman with children that I was overcompensating, proving I could be just as ruthless and single-minded as any man. But you showed me that's not necessary. That being a whole person with a full life doesn't make you less capable. It makes you more so. So thank you for that. After the call ended, Malcolm sat quietly thinking about Helen's words. He'd been fighting for himself, for his right to have Nora and Ivy in his life without apology. But apparently he'd been fighting for something larger. For the idea that leaders could be human. That success didn't require sacrifice of everything that made life worth living. He shared the conversation with Nora later that night. You're changing minds, she said. Not just about you but about what leadership looks like. That's important work. I just wanted to keep my company and my family. And in the process you're showing other people they can have both too. That's a gift, Malcolm. As autumn turned to winter, their lives settled into a comfortable rhythm. Ivy's health continued to improve. Her energy returned, her color came back, and Dr. Okonkwo declared her recovery a complete success. The scar on her chest would fade over time, but Ivy wore it proudly, telling anyone who asked that it was her warrior mark. Malcolm officially adopted Ivy in early December, a small courthouse ceremony that was somehow more meaningful than any business deal he'd ever closed. When the judge declared that Ivy Wilson was now Ivy Prescott, legally and forever, Malcolm wept openly. Ivy, wearing a bright red dress for the occasion, hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. Now you're really my daddy, she said. Now it's official, Malcolm agreed. But I've been your daddy since the day we met. Nora watched them both with tears streaming down her face, her mother beside her doing the same. Thomas, who'd attended as a witness, wasn't even trying to hide his emotion. Diane had sent flowers to the courthouse, an elaborate arrangement with a card that read, "Congratulations on making it official. We always knew she was yours." That night, they celebrated with pizza and ice cream, Ivy's requested menu. She wanted to watch a movie about a girl who went to space, so they all piled on the couch together, Ivy between Malcolm and Nora, and watched as the fictional girl achieved her dreams through determination and courage. That's going to be me someday, Ivy announced. I'm going to go to space. And my heart is going to work perfectly because Dr. Okonkwo fixed it, and my daddy made sure I had the best doctor. You can do anything you want, Malcolm told her. The world is yours, Ivy Prescott. Later, after Ivy was asleep, Malcolm and Nora discussed wedding plans. They decided on a small ceremony in the spring, nothing elaborate. Just close friends and family, a celebration of the love they'd found in the most unexpected place. I want to get married at that cafe, Nora said. Where we first met. Is that too strange? It's perfect, Malcolm said. That's where everything started. Where a little girl saw a sad man and decided he needed company. Where you taught me what kindness looks like. That's absolutely where we should get married. They contacted the cafe owner, who was delighted by the request and offered to close the cafe for an afternoon so they could have a private ceremony. Malcolm arranged everything else. Flowers, food, a photographer. He wanted Nora to just show up and enjoy the day, not worry about logistics or costs or any of the 1,000 details that went into planning a wedding. As Christmas approached, Malcolm realized how much his life had changed in less than 6 months. Last Christmas he'd been alone, working through the holidays because he had nothing better to do. This year, the penthouse was decorated with a tree that Ivy had insisted on decorating herself, resulting in a lopsided but charming arrangement of ornaments. Stockings hung from the mantel, 3 of them each embroidered with their names. The scent of Nora's baking filled the apartment. Ivy's artwork covered the refrigerator and walls. Evidence of life, of love, everywhere he looked. On Christmas morning, Ivy woke them both at 6, bouncing on their bed with excitement that couldn't be contained. Malcolm had never been happier to be woken early. They stumbled to the living room, Ivy running ahead, and spent the morning opening presents. Malcolm had gone overboard, he knew, buying Ivy everything she'd casually mentioned wanting over the past months. Toys, books, art supplies, clothes, a telescope for their trips to the planetarium. But Ivy's favorite gift was the simplest. A framed photo of the 3 of them from the day Malcolm had proposed, all tangled together on that park blanket, laughing and crying at once. Thomas had captured it perfectly, the joy and love evident in every face. "This is us," Ivy said, hugging the frame. "Our family." "That's us," Malcolm agreed. "Forever." Nora gave Malcolm a gift that made him cry. A leather-bound journal with the words, "Our Story," embossed on the cover. Inside, she'd written the story of how they met, every detail preserved, every moment documented. Their first conversation. The zoo trip. The surgery. The proposal. All of it written in Nora's neat handwriting, a record of how their lives had intertwined. "So we never forget," Nora said. "So Ivy can read it someday and know how much we loved each other from the very beginning." Malcolm kissed her, tasting the salt of his own tears. "I could never forget. But this is perfect. Thank you." They spent Christmas Day in pajamas, eating too much food, watching movies, playing games. Ivy taught Malcolm how to play her favorite board game, a complicated affair involving dragons and princesses that made absolutely no sense but was apparently very important. Nora's mother came over for dinner, bringing her famous sweet potato pie and stories about Nora as a child that made Ivy laugh until she hiccuped. As the day wound down and Ivy finally crashed from excitement and sugar, falling asleep on the couch with her head in Malcolm's lap, he looked around at his family and felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. "I love you," he told Nora, who was sitting beside him, her hand in his. "I love this life we're building. I love every single moment of it." "Even the hard moments?" Nora asked. "Especially the hard moments. Because they prove it's real. That we're choosing each other even when it's difficult." "Then we're going to be okay," Nora said. "No matter what comes, we're going to be okay." Malcolm believed her. He'd survived a car crash that should have killed him. He'd rebuilt his life when everyone said he couldn't. He'd fought for his company and won. He'd found love when he'd stopped looking for it. And now he had a family, a real family built on foundation of kindness and hope and love that led them all to exactly where they needed to be. Whatever challenges the future held, they'd face them together. As a family. And that was all that mattered. Spring arrived in bursts of color and warmth, transforming the city from winter's gray palette into something vibrant and alive. Cherry blossoms lined the streets near Malcolm's building. The park where he'd proposed turned lush and green. And the garden behind the cafe where they'd first met, which Malcolm had never even known existed, revealed itself to be a hidden oasis of flowers and winding paths. The cafe owner, Maria Santos, had taken Malcolm on a tour of the space when he'd come to finalize wedding arrangements. "My grandfather planted this garden 50 years ago," she'd explained, gesturing to the roses and tulips and flowering trees. "He said every cafe should have a secret heart, a place of beauty hidden from the rushing world. I think your wedding here will honor his memory." Malcolm had immediately known this was perfect. Not the cafe's public space, but this secret garden where beauty bloomed away from casual observers. It felt like a metaphor for what he and Nora had built together. The wedding was planned for the last Saturday in April, and as the date approached, Malcolm found himself surprisingly nervous. He'd negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but the idea of standing in front of their small gathering and declaring his love publicly made his hands shake. You're anxious, Nora observed one evening 2 weeks before the wedding. They were cleaning up after dinner, Ivy already bathed and reading in bed. These quiet moments had become Malcolm's favorite part of the day. Is it that obvious? You've reorganized the bookshelf 3 times in the last hour. That's your anxiety tell. Malcolm laughed. I didn't know I had an anxiety tell. You do. So what's worrying you? He set down the book he'd been needlessly rearranging and turned to face her. What if I'm not enough? As a husband, as a father to Ivy, as a partner in building this life we want. What if my limitations become frustrating over time? What if you wake up one day and realize you settled? Nora crossed the room and took his face in her hands. Malcolm Prescott, listen to me carefully. You are more than enough. You have always been more than enough. Your wheelchair is not a limitation on our love or our life together. The only limitations I see are the ones you imagine. You want to know what I see when I look at you? What? I see the man who sat alone in a cafe and let my curious daughter interrupt his misery. I see the man who offered to help with Ivy's medical care without expecting anything in return. I see the man who held my hand through the scariest day of my life. I see someone who shows up every single day choosing us over and over. I see the love of my life. That's what I see. Malcolm pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything good that comes to you. When are you going to believe that? I'm working on it. Work faster, Nora said with a smile. We're getting married in 2 weeks and I need you to know, bone deep, that you're the only person I want standing beside me. Or sitting beside me. However you want to phrase it. Malcolm laughed, the tension breaking. I'll be sitting probably. More comfortable that way. Perfect. I'll be standing next to you, holding your hand, promising to love you forever. Sound good? Sounds perfect. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of final preparations. Ivy was beside herself with excitement, practicing her flower girl duties daily, scattering imaginary petals around the penthouse and narrating her own importance. I have a very important job, she'd announced to anyone who'd listen. I'm making sure everyone knows love is happening. Malcolm's assistant Diane handled most of the logistics, coordinating with the cafe, arranging flowers, confirming the small guest list. Thomas would be there, of course. Diane and her husband. Nora's mother. Dr. Okonkwo, who'd become a friend beyond just Ivy's doctor. Helen Carter from Malcolm's board. A few of Nora's nursing colleagues. And Marcus, Malcolm's physical therapist, who'd been there through the darkest days after the accident and deserved to see this bright outcome. The night before the wedding, Malcolm couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, listening to Nora breathe beside him, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The accident that had changed his life. The 3 years of isolation and bitterness. The random decision to try dating again that had led to that cafe. A little girl's observation that he looked sad. Every decision, every moment, every seemingly random choice had led him here. He must have drifted off eventually because he woke to Ivy bouncing on the bed, her bright yellow dress already on, hair styled in elaborate braids that Nora had clearly spent significant time on. It's wedding day. Ivy shrieked. You're marrying Mommy today. Malcolm rubbed his eyes, smiling at her enthusiasm. I am. Are you ready for your important job? I was born ready. That's what Grandma said. She said I'm a natural at making sure love happens. Your grandma is very wise. Nora appeared in the doorway and Malcolm's breath caught. She wore a simple robe, her hair in curlers, no makeup yet. She was beautiful. She'd always been beautiful, but today there was something extra. A glow. Pure happiness radiating from every part of her. No seeing the dress, she warned, catching him staring. Bad luck. I don't believe in bad luck anymore. Not after finding you. Smooth talker. But still tradition. Come on, Ivy, let's let Daddy get ready. We have our own preparations to finish. They disappeared into the master bedroom, leaving Malcolm to get ready in the guest room. Thomas arrived at noon to help him dress, an unexpected but appreciated gesture. You're really doing this, Thomas said as he helped Malcolm with his tie. Deep green, Nora's favorite color. I really am. I'm happy for you, sir. You deserve this. Call me Malcolm. After all this time, I think we're past formalities. Thomas smiled. Malcolm then. You've come a long way from that night in the cafe. The man who got stood up. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Nora and Ivy hadn't approached you? All the time. I'd probably still be alone, bitter, throwing myself into work because I had nothing else. They saved me, Thomas. They reminded me what it means to be fully human. You saved them too. Ivy's healthy because of you. Nora's happy because of you. It goes both ways. At 1 o'clock they caravanned to the cafe. Malcolm rode with Thomas while Diane drove Nora, Ivy, and Mrs. Wilson separately. Tradition, Nora had insisted, laughing. They shouldn't see each other before the ceremony. The cafe's secret garden had been transformed. White chairs arranged in neat rows. An arch covered in flowers at the front. Soft music playing from hidden speakers. Maria had outdone herself, creating a space that felt both intimate and magical. Malcolm positioned himself at the front beside the officiant, a friend of Maria's who'd agreed to perform the ceremony. The guests filed in, taking their seats. Diane dabbing at her eyes before she even sat down. Marcus giving Malcolm a thumbs up. Dr. Okonkwo smiling warmly. Everyone who mattered gathered in this small space to witness something beautiful. Then the music changed and Ivy appeared at the garden entrance. She walked slowly, carefully, dropping rose petals with exaggerated precision. Her face was serious with concentration, and Malcolm loved her so much in that moment he thought his heart might burst. When she reached the front, she gave him a quick hug before taking her seat in the front row next to her grandmother. And then Nora appeared. She wore a simple dress, cream-colored, tea-length, with delicate lace at the sleeves. Her hair was down, flowing over her shoulders. She carried a small bouquet of wildflowers. She wore the ring Malcolm had given her, but no other jewelry. She didn't need any. She was absolutely radiant. Their eyes met and Malcolm forgot to breathe. This woman. This incredible woman was choosing to marry him, to build a life with him, to trust him with her heart and her daughter's heart. How had he gotten this lucky? Nora walked down the short aisle alone, her own woman making her own choice. When she reached Malcolm, she handed her bouquet to her mother and took both his hands in hers. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he whispered back. "You're beautiful. You're crying. Happy tears. The best kind." The officiant cleared his throat, smiling at them both. "We're gathered here today to witness the union of Malcolm and Nora, two people who found each other in the most unexpected way and built something extraordinary together. I understand they've written their own vows." Malcolm went first, his voice steady despite the emotion coursing through him. "Nora, 6 months ago I was sitting alone in this cafe, convinced that my life was essentially over. That the best parts were behind me, and all that was left was managing a slow decline into irrelevance. And then your daughter asked why I looked sad. Such a simple question. But it changed everything. You changed everything. You taught me that kindness is not weakness. That accepting help is not failure. That love is not something to be earned through perfection, but something freely given to imperfect people who choose to show up. You showed up for me when you had no reason to. You let me into your life when it would have been easier to walk away. And you loved me not despite my limitations, but as a whole person worthy of love exactly as I am. I promise to spend the rest of my life showing up for you, choosing you every single day, being the partner and father our family deserves. I love you, Nora Wilson. I love every part of you. And I cannot wait to spend forever proving it." Nora was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe away the tears. She took a shaky breath and began her own vows. "Malcolm, I came to this cafe 6 months ago to celebrate my daughter's successful doctor's appointment with hot chocolate and a moment of peace. I never expected to meet someone who would transform our entire lives. I'd been alone for so long, convinced that I had to be strong enough to handle everything myself. That depending on anyone was dangerous, that opening my heart was foolish. And then I saw you sitting alone looking so lost and Ivy saw you too. We made a choice that day to see you, really see you, and you made a choice to see us back. You saw a tired single mother and a sick little girl and instead of walking away you walked toward us. You offered help without expecting anything in return. You loved Ivy like she was yours before any paperwork made it official. You showed me that partnership means sharing burdens, not carrying everything alone. You proved that love is not about perfection but about commitment. About choosing each other on the hard days and the easy days and every day in between. I love you, Malcolm Prescott. I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn refusal to accept limitations. I love how you love my daughter. I love the life we're building together. And I promise to spend forever showing up for you, choosing you, being the partner you deserve. We're in this together now. Always." The officiant had to pause to compose himself. Around them there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even Thomas was discreetly wiping his face. "By the power vested in me," the officiant finally said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Malcolm, you may kiss your bride." Malcolm pulled Nora down to him and they kissed as husband and wife for the first time. The small gathering erupted in applause. Ivy cheered louder than anyone, jumping up and down. And in that moment, surrounded by people who loved them, Malcolm felt complete in a way he'd never imagined possible. The reception was held inside the cafe, Maria having prepared a feast that covered every table. Cake and champagne and laughter and toasts that made everyone cry all over again. Diane shared embarrassing stories about Malcolm's early days as CEO. Mrs. Wilson talked about Nora's determination as a child, how she'd always been a fighter. Dr. Okonkwo toasted to Ivy's health and the family's future. Marcus gave a short speech about watching Malcolm rebuild his life and being honored to witness this next chapter. When it was Ivy's turn, she stood on her chair and announced, "My daddy used to be sad. Now he's happy because he has me and mommy. That's what love does. It makes sad people happy." The end. She sat down to thunderous applause. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Malcolm found himself sitting with Nora in a quiet corner, watching their guests mingle and celebrate. "We did it," Nora said. "We're actually married. We really are. How does it feel? Like coming home. Like everything finally makes sense. How does it feel for you?" Malcolm thought about the question. "Like I finally understand what I was surviving for. All those hard days after the accident, all the physical therapy and relearning and fighting to rebuild my life, I was surviving for this. For you. For Ivy. For this family. I just didn't know it yet. Do you think we would have found each other if the accident hadn't happened? If you'd still been the man you were before? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But I think maybe I needed to be broken first to appreciate what we have. To understand what actually matters. You were never broken, Malcolm. Just wounded. There's a difference. You're right. And you healed me. You and Ivy both." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Ivy dance with her grandmother, both of them laughing at some private joke. Their family. Their beautiful, unexpected, perfect family. As the sun set and the garden lights came on, casting everything in a warm glow, Malcolm made one more promise. Not aloud but to himself. He would never take this for granted. Never let a day pass without appreciating what he'd been given. Never forget that kindness and hope and love had led him here, to this garden, to this woman, to this life that was more beautiful than anything he could have planned or imagined. Later, as they said goodbye to their guests and prepared to head home, they decided against a honeymoon right away, wanting Ivy with them, planning a family trip for later in the summer. Maria pulled Malcolm aside. "My grandfather would have loved this," she said. "He always said this garden was waiting for the right love story. And yours is the right one. Thank you for letting me be part of it. Thank you for providing the space where it all began. Where Nora and Ivy first approached me. This cafe will always be special to us." They drove home as a family, Ivy half asleep in the back seat, clutching Hope the star and mumbling about how pretty the flowers were. Thomas caught Malcolm's eye in the rearview mirror and smiled. In the seat beside him, Nora rested her head on his shoulder, her hand in his, her ring catching the streetlights as they passed. Malcolm thought about that man 6 months ago, sitting alone in a cafe, believing his life was essentially over. He wanted to tell that man to hold on. To believe that good things could still happen. To trust that even in darkness, there was light waiting if he just remained open to it. But he didn't need to tell that man anything. Because that man had found his way here, to this moment, to this life. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness. A little girl who saw someone sad and decided to help. A mother who taught her daughter to see people. And a man who was brave enough to accept what they offered. Kindness. Hope. Love. The three things that had led them all home. The Monday after the wedding brought an unexpected visitor. Malcolm was working from home, reviewing contracts at the dining table while Nora prepared lunch and Ivy practiced writing her letters at the kitchen counter. The intercom buzzed and Thomas's voice came through. "Mr. Prescott, there's a Mrs. Catherine Prescott here to see you. She says she's your mother." Malcolm froze. His mother had been dead for 5 years. Which meant this could only be one person. "You mean she's my stepmother? Send her up." Nora caught the tension in his voice immediately. "Malcolm? Who is it?" "Catherine. My father's wife. I haven't seen her since before the accident. Do you want me to take Ivy to her room?" "No. Stay. She needs to see what my life looks like now. All of it." The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and Catherine Prescott stepped out. She was exactly as Malcolm remembered. Impeccably dressed in designer clothes, jewelry that cost more than most cars, hair and makeup perfect. She was in her late 50s, elegant in the way of people who'd never struggled for anything. She'd married Malcolm's father for his money, everyone knew it, and she'd been good at her job, playing the society wife with practiced ease. Her eyes swept the penthouse, taking in the toys scattered in the corner, Ivy's artwork on the refrigerator, the general comfortable disorder of a home where real people lived. Her expression suggested she'd smelled something unpleasant. "Malcolm," she said, her tone cool. "You're looking well." "Catherine. This is unexpected. I don't believe we've spoken in 4 years." "Yes, well. I heard through mutual acquaintances that you'd gotten married. I wanted to meet your new wife." Her gaze shifted to Nora, dismissive and evaluating at once. This must be her. Nora stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Nora. It's nice to meet you." Catherine took Nora's hand limply, the way one might touch something contaminated. "Charming. And this is my daughter Ivy." Malcolm's daughter now legally. Catherine's eyebrows rose. "I see. How progressive. Malcolm, might we speak privately? Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my wife." "Very well." Catherine sat uninvited on the couch, crossing her legs with deliberate grace. "I'll be direct. I've been informed that you've adopted a child and married a woman you met less than a year ago. A nurse." She said the word like it was something distasteful. "I'm concerned about your judgment. More specifically, I'm concerned that you're being taken advantage of." Malcolm felt anger rise in his chest, hot and immediate. "Excuse me?" "Oh, don't be naive, Malcolm. A single mother with a sick child meets a wealthy man in a wheelchair? The optics are obvious. She saw an opportunity and took it. I don't blame her entirely. People from that background often have to be resourceful. But I would hate to see you hurt when she inevitably shows her true colors." Nora made a sound like she'd been slapped. Ivy, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it, moved closer to her mother. Malcolm wheeled forward, positioning himself between Catherine and his family. "Let me be very clear," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "You don't know anything about Nora or her background. You don't know how we met or what our relationship is built on. And you certainly don't have any right to make judgments about my family. I'm trying to protect you." "No, you're trying to protect my father's money. Money that will eventually be mine. Money you're afraid I might share with my wife and daughter. Let me ease your mind, I absolutely plan to share it. Everything I have is theirs. Because that's what family means. Something you've never understood." Catherine's expression hardened. "Your father was right about you. He said the accident made you soft, emotional, unable to think clearly about business or legacy." "My father said that?" "He said you'd surround yourself with people who'd coddle you, take advantage of your guilt over the wheelchair. He warned me this might happen." Malcolm laughed, a bitter sound. "My father hasn't spoken to me since 3 months after the accident. He told me I was an embarrassment and walked out. So forgive me if I don't particularly care about his opinions or his warnings. And as for you, Catherine, I think it's time you left." "Malcolm, please. I'm trying to help." "No, you're trying to protect money that has nothing to do with you. My will is none of your business. My marriage is none of your business. My daughter is none of your business. The only thing I'll say is this. When my father dies and I inherit whatever he hasn't already spent on maintaining appearances, I plan to donate the majority of it to charity. Medical research specifically. Pediatric cardiology. So your concern about me squandering the family fortune on my wife and child is misplaced. I'm planning to squander it on children like Ivy all over the world. Now please leave my home." Catherine stood, her composure cracking slightly. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was letting you into my home. Thomas will see you out." After Catherine left, the penthouse was silent. Nora stood very still, her arms wrapped around herself. Ivy looked confused and a little scared. Malcolm felt exhausted, the anger draining out of him and leaving only weariness behind. "I'm sorry," Nora said quietly. "I'm so sorry that meeting me has caused problems with your family." "She's not my family. You are. Ivy is. Thomas and Diane and the people who showed up to our wedding, those are my family. Catherine and my father, they stopped being family a long time ago. But still, she thinks I'm using you, taking advantage. What if other people think that too?" Malcolm wheeled over to her, taking her hands. "Let them think whatever they want. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's all that matters." "Is it though?" "Malcolm, we come from very different worlds. I'll never fit into that world, the society parties and charity galas and whatever else people like Catherine do. What if you regret that someday? What if you miss that life?" "I don't miss anything about that life. It was hollow and fake and full of people who measured worth by bank accounts and bloodlines. You've given me something real, Nora. Something Catherine and people like her will never understand. Don't let her poison what we have." Ivy tugged on Nora's sleeve. "Mommy, why was that lady so mean?" Nora knelt down to her daughter's level. Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand, baby. That lady doesn't understand our family, so she said mean things. But that's her problem, not ours. We're a good family, Ivy said firmly. Daddy loves us and we love him. That's all that matters. You're exactly right, Malcolm said. That's all that matters. But over the next few days, Catherine's words lingered like poison. Nora became quieter, more withdrawn. She started questioning small things. Whether Malcolm really wanted her opinion on financial decisions. Whether she should go back to work full-time. Whether Ivy should attend public school instead of the private academy Malcolm had enrolled her in. Malcolm finally confronted her on Thursday evening after Ivy was asleep. Talk to me. What's going on in your head? Nora was quiet for a long moment. Catherine was right about one thing. I did benefit enormously from meeting you. Ivy got the best medical care available. We live in this incredible place. I don't have to work 3 jobs anymore. My daughter has everything she could possibly need. And yes, I love you deeply and truly. But what if somewhere in my subconscious, when I agreed to marry you, there was a part of me that saw the practical benefits? What if I'm not as pure-hearted as I want to believe? Malcolm took her hands. Nora, you fought accepting my help for months. You argued every time I tried to pay for something or make your life easier. You insisted on contributing however you could. You didn't ask me for a single thing. I had to practically force you to accept basic help with Ivy's medical care. So no, I don't believe for a second that you married me for practical benefits. You married me because we love each other. Period. But your family thinks. My family consists of you and Ivy. That's it. My father and Catherine lost the right to opinions about my life when they abandoned me. Their thoughts don't matter. They matter to you though. I can see it. Catherine's visit hurt you. Malcolm couldn't deny that. It did hurt. Not because I value her opinion, but because it reminded me of what my father said after the accident. That I was damaged goods. That I'd never have a real life again. That no one would want me as I am now. For a long time I believed him. And then I met you and you proved him wrong in every possible way. You wanted me. Chair and all. You saw me as a complete person. Catherine showing up and implying you're using me, it triggered all those old wounds. Made me wonder just for a second if my father was right all along. Your father was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. You're not damaged, Malcolm. You're one of the strongest, most capable, most loving people I've ever known. The wheelchair doesn't define you or limit what you can do or who you can be. It's just part of your story, but it's not the whole story. I know that here, Malcolm said, pointing to his head. But here, he touched his chest, sometimes I still struggle to believe it. They held each other for a long time, both working through the insecurities that Catherine's visit had surfaced. Finally, Nora pulled back. I want to meet your father, she said. Malcolm blinked. What? Why? Because he's your father. Because you deserve to have that relationship even if it's complicated. And because I want him to see what we have. I want him to see that his son is happy and loved and building a beautiful life. Not for his approval but for your healing. You need closure with him, Malcolm. And I want to help you get it. Malcolm wanted to refuse. The idea of seeing his father, of subjecting Nora and Ivy to his judgment, was painful. But maybe Nora was right. Maybe he did need closure. Maybe he needed to look his father in the eye and show him exactly how wrong he'd been. Okay, he said finally. I'll reach out. The meeting was arranged for the following Saturday at a restaurant, Neutral Territory. Malcolm's father, Richard Prescott, arrived exactly on time, a tall man in his 70s who still carried himself like he owned every room he entered. Catherine was with him, looking smug, clearly expecting this meeting to expose Nora as the gold digger she believed her to be. Malcolm had asked Thomas to bring them in the accessible van, and as they entered the restaurant, he saw his father's expression flicker with something that might have been shame before settling back into cool neutrality. Malcolm, Richard said. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Thank you for coming. This is my wife, Nora, and my daughter, Ivy. Richard's gaze swept over them both, evaluating. Ivy, wearing a bright blue dress, looked back at him with curiosity but no fear. Nora stood tall, her hand on Ivy's shoulder, her expression calm. Pleased to meet you, Richard said, though his tone suggested he was anything but. Catherine's told me quite a bit about you. I'm sure she has, Nora replied evenly. Though I imagine her perspective is somewhat skewed. They sat down, the tension at the table thick enough to cut. Ivy, bless her, broke it by asking, Are you my daddy's daddy? Richard looked startled. I suppose I am, yes. Then why don't you see him? My daddy is wonderful. If you were my daddy, I'd want to see you all the time. Out of the mouths of children. Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. Malcolm decided to take control of the conversation. Dad, I asked for this meeting because I wanted you to meet my family properly. I wanted you to see what my life looks like now. And I wanted to tell you to your face that you were wrong. Wrong about what? About everything. You said the accident made me weak. That I couldn't run my company from a wheelchair. That no one would respect me or want me. You were wrong on every count. My company is more successful now than it was before. I've built a family that loves me unconditionally. I'm happier than I've ever been. And none of that happened because I ignored my limitations or pretended the accident didn't change me. It happened because I accepted what happened and built a new life, a better life from the pieces. Richard was quiet for a long moment. I see. Is that all you have to say? What would you like me to say, Malcolm? That I was wrong to suggest you step down from your company? That I should have been more supportive? Perhaps I should have. But I was trying to protect you from failure, from public humiliation. You were trying to protect yourself from being associated with a disabled son. Let's at least be honest. Richard's jaw tightened. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You couldn't handle seeing me in this chair. It made you uncomfortable, made you face your own mortality, your own vulnerability. So you walked away. You convinced yourself it was for my own good, but really it was about your comfort. Malcolm. Catherine tried to interject, but Nora cut her off. Let him speak. He deserves to say this. Malcolm continued, I spent 3 years believing what you told me. That I was less than I had been. That my life was essentially over. That I should just accept diminished expectations and fade into the background. And then I met Nora and Ivy and they showed me how wrong you were. They saw me as a complete person. They expected nothing less than everything I was capable of giving. They loved me without conditions or reservations. They gave me back the parts of myself I'd lost, not because of the accident, but because of your rejection. Richard looked at Nora, really looked at her for the first time. You love him. Completely, Nora said without hesitation. Even though nothing. I love Malcolm. All of him. His strength, his kindness, his intelligence, his humor. The wheelchair is just part of his story, not the defining feature. I'm honestly shocked that you can't see what an incredible person your son is. Richard sat back, something in his expression shifting. He looked at Ivy, who was coloring on the kids' menu the restaurant had provided, completely unconcerned with the adult drama playing out around her. She calls him Daddy? He is her daddy, Nora said. Legally, emotionally, in every way that matters. He's shown her what a father should be. Patient, present, loving. She's lucky to have him. And you're not using him? For his money? Nora's expression hardened. I fought accepting Malcolm's help for months. I agreed to marry him in spite of his wealth, not because of it. I would love him if he was working minimum wage and living in a studio apartment. The money is irrelevant to our relationship. What matters is that he's a good man who treats me and my daughter with respect and love. That's worth more than any bank account. The meal arrived, providing a break in the tension. They ate in awkward silence, Ivy the only one chattering, telling Richard about school and her heart surgery and her plans to become an astronaut. Richard listened, and something in his face gradually softened. After the meal, Richard asked Malcolm if they could speak privately. They moved to a quieter corner of the restaurant while Nora and Catherine stayed at the table in equally awkward silence, Ivy between them like a buffer. I owe you an apology, Richard said. You were right. I couldn't handle seeing you in that chair. It scared me, made me face things I didn't want to face. And yes, I was embarrassed. I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. I built my identity on being strong, independent, never showing weakness. Seeing you after the accident, seeing you struggle, it forced me to acknowledge that strength and weakness are more complicated than I wanted to believe. I know that wasn't easy to say. It's not easy to admit I've been a terrible father. That I abandoned you when you needed me most. I convinced myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself. And I've missed 3 years of your life because of my cowardice. Yes, you have. Can you forgive me? Malcolm thought about it. Could he? Should he? I don't know, Dad. You really hurt me. Your rejection, your implications that I was less than before, that shaped how I saw myself for a long time. I carried that weight, that belief that I was damaged and unworthy. It nearly destroyed me. But you overcame it. You built this life. Not because of you. In spite of you. And yes, I've overcome it, but the scars are still there. Forgiveness isn't something I can just decide to do. It's a process. But if you're genuinely sorry, if you're willing to actually be part of my life going forward, to know my wife and my daughter and support the family I've built, Then maybe we can work toward it. Richard nodded slowly. I'd like that. I'd like to try at least. Your wife, Nora, she's remarkable. And that little girl, she's special. You built something good here, Malcolm. Something I didn't think was possible for you. I'm glad I was wrong. They returned to the table where Catherine was looking distinctly uncomfortable. Nora had apparently used the private time to have her own conversation, and whatever she'd said had clearly landed. Catherine, Richard said. We're leaving. Malcolm, thank you for this meeting. I hope we can do it again soon. After they left, Nora let out a breath. That was intense. What did you say to Catherine? I told her that if she ever implies again that I'm using you, or that our relationship is anything less than genuine, I will make it my personal mission to ensure she understands exactly how wrong she is. I also told her that the money doesn't matter to me, but the love does, and I will protect that love from anyone who tries to diminish it. I may have been slightly more forceful than necessary. Malcolm laughed. I love you so much. I love you too. And I love that you stood up to your father. That was brave. I learned from the best. Ivy looked up from her coloring. Is Daddy's daddy going to come visit us now? Maybe, Malcolm said. Would you like that? Only if he's nice. I don't like people who are mean to you. Me neither, sweetheart. As they drove home, Malcolm felt lighter than he had in days. The confrontation with his father hadn't magically healed years of hurt, but it was a start. And more importantly, he'd proven to himself and to his father that he'd built a life worth having. A family worth protecting. A future worth fighting for. Later that night, after Ivy was asleep, Malcolm received a text from his father. I meant what I said. I'd like to try to be part of your life again. No expectations, just hope. Thank you for giving me the chance. Malcolm showed the text to Nora. What do you think? I think people can change if they want to. I think your father was confronted with the reality of what he lost and he's trying to make amends. Whether you let him back in is completely your choice. But if you do, I'll support it. Family is complicated, but it's also important. Even when they hurt you? Especially then. Because forgiveness isn't about them deserving it. It's about you being free from carrying the weight of their mistakes. If you can forgive your father, even partially, it's not for him. It's for you. Malcolm thought about that. He'd been carrying his father's rejection for years, letting it shape his self-perception, his fears, his hesitations. Maybe it was time to put that burden down. Not to forget what happened, but to stop letting it control his present and future. He texted back, one step at a time. But I'm willing to try. The response came immediately, that's all I can ask for. Thank you, son. As Malcolm lay in bed that night, Nora curled against his side, he thought about how far he'd come. From the broken man in the cafe to this, a full life with people who loved him, a family he'd built, a future full of possibility. The road had been hard, the obstacles many, but he'd made it. And more importantly, he'd made it without sacrificing who he was. He'd made it by embracing all of himself, limitations and strengths alike. The next chapter of his life was just beginning. And for the first time in years he was eager to see where it led. 6 months after the wedding, Malcolm stood in the same cafe where everything had begun, watching workers hang a banner that read, Grand Opening, Hope Foundation for Pediatric Cardiology Research. The cafe's back garden, where he and Nora had married, had been transformed for the evening's celebration. Investors, donors, medical professionals, and families whose children had benefited from the foundation's first grants were gathering to celebrate what Malcolm considered his greatest achievement. Not his company, which continued to thrive. Not his wealth, which he was systematically redirecting toward meaningful causes. But this. A foundation named after Ivy's stuffed star, dedicated to ensuring that every child with a heart condition could receive the kind of care that had saved his daughter's life. Dr. Okonkwo was the foundation's medical director, working part-time to oversee grant distribution and research priorities. Nora had joined the board, bringing her nursing perspective and her passion for accessible healthcare. Even Richard, Malcolm's father, had donated a significant sum and agreed to serve as a funding advisor, his decades of investment experience put to good use for once. The reconciliation with his father had been slow and sometimes painful. Richard attended family dinners now, usually twice a month, and he was learning to be a grandfather to Ivy. It wasn't perfect. Richard still sometimes said things that revealed old prejudices or limited thinking. But he was trying, genuinely trying, and Malcolm had learned to appreciate the effort even when the execution was flawed. Catherine, on the other hand, had gradually faded from their lives. She and Richard had separated, an amicable split that surprised no one. Richard had admitted that he'd married her for the wrong reasons and stayed out of convenience rather than love. He was working on being alone, on defining himself as something other than wealthy and married. It was good growth if later than it should have been. "You're thinking too much," Nora said, coming up behind Malcolm and wrapping her arms around him. She wore a deep red dress, her hair up, looking every bit as beautiful as she had on their wedding day. "This is supposed to be a celebration." "I'm celebrating. Just also reflecting." "On what?" "How much has changed? A year ago I was alone and miserable. Now look at this. A foundation that's going to help thousands of children. The family I love more than anything. A life that actually means something beyond profit margins." "You always meant something, Malcolm. The accident didn't change your worth. It just changed your perspective." "You changed my perspective. We changed each other. That's what love does." Ivy ran up, wearing a yellow dress that matched her bright personality. At 6 now she'd grown taller, stronger, full of energy that seemed boundless. Her scar had faded to a thin line she wore proudly, showing it to anyone who asked and telling them about her warrior mark. She was thriving in first grade, already reading above her level, asking questions that challenged her teachers. She wanted to be an astronaut, doctor, artist, changing her dream career daily but always with absolute conviction. "Daddy, people are asking for you," Ivy announced. "They want you to make a speech." "Already?" "The event just started." "People are eager," Nora said with a smile. "They want to hear from the man who made this happen." Malcolm wheeled himself to the small stage set up in the garden, Nora and Ivy following. The crowd quieted as he positioned himself at the microphone. Looking out at the gathering, he saw so many faces that mattered. Thomas, dressed in his finest suit, beaming with pride. Diane and her husband, who'd driven in from the suburbs specifically for this. Dr. Okonkwo, elegant and professional, her own pride in the foundation evident. Marcus, his physical therapist, who'd brought his family to celebrate. Helen Carter and several other board members from his company. Nora's mother, Mrs. Wilson, dabbing at her eyes before he'd even started speaking. And throughout the crowd, families with children who had heart conditions, people who would directly benefit from the foundation's work. "A year ago," Malcolm began, "I was sitting alone in this cafe, convinced my life was essentially over. I'd survived a car accident, learned to navigate the world in a wheelchair, rebuilt my career. But I'd lost something essential. Hope. Purpose. The belief that life could be about more than just existing, more than just managing decline. I'd forgotten what it meant to truly live." He gestured to Ivy, who was sitting in the front row holding Hope the star. "And then this little girl saw me looking sad and decided I needed company. She and her mother sat with me, talked with me, reminded me what human connection looks like. They gave me a reason to care again. And in the process, they gave me a daughter who needed medical care I could help provide." Malcolm's voice caught with emotion, and he paused to collect himself. Ivy had a ventricular septal defect, a hole in her heart. She needed surgery, specialized care, the kind of treatment that isn't accessible to everyone. "We were lucky. I had resources. I could afford the best doctors, the best hospital, everything she needed. But I kept thinking about all the families who can't. All the children who have the same condition or worse, whose parents are working 3 jobs and still can't afford the care their kids need. That wasn't right. That wasn't fair. And I decided to do something about it." He looked at Dr. Okonkwo. "The Hope Foundation exists to ensure that pediatric heart conditions don't have to be a death sentence or a financial disaster. We're funding research, yes. But we're also providing grants directly to families who need help with medical costs. We're supporting training for doctors in underserved areas. We're building partnerships with hospitals to expand accessible care. We're doing everything we can to ensure that every child, regardless of their family's financial situation, has access to the kind of care that saved Ivy's life." The crowd applauded, and Malcolm waited for quiet to return. "I want to thank everyone who made this possible. Dr. Okonkwo, for your medical expertise and your passion for this cause. My wife Nora, for joining our board and bringing the perspective of someone who's lived this struggle. My father, Richard Prescott, for contributing significantly to our initial funding. All of our donors, large and small, who believe in this mission. And most importantly, I want to thank the families here tonight. Your children are why we do this. Your strength and resilience inspire us. And we promise to do everything in our power to support you." He paused, then added, "Ivy, can you come up here for a second?" Ivy bounded onto the stage, her natural showmanship evident. She took the microphone from Malcolm without hesitation. "Hi everyone," she said, her voice clear and confident. "My name is Ivy Prescott, and I had heart surgery when I was 5. It was scary, but my mommy and daddy were there and the doctors were amazing, and now my heart works perfectly. This foundation is named after my star, Hope, because that's what you need when you're sick. You need hope that things will get better. And this foundation gives people hope. So thank you for coming and thank you for helping other kids like me. The end. She handed the microphone back to Malcolm and skipped off the stage to thunderous applause. Malcolm caught Nora's eye, and they shared a look of pure parental pride. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and connections. Malcolm talked with families about their experiences, with doctors about research priorities, with donors about long-term funding strategies. He was exhausted by the end, but it was the good kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from doing meaningful work. As the last guests departed and workers began cleaning up, Malcolm, Nora, and Ivy sat in the garden under the now dark sky. String lights overhead gave everything a soft glow. The cafe was closed, but Maria had left them coffee and hot chocolate as a thank you for choosing her space for the foundation's launch. This was a good day, Nora said, leaning against Malcolm's shoulder. The best kind of day, Malcolm agreed. When I grow up, Ivy announced, I'm going to run the foundation. And I'm going to make sure every single kid in the world gets their heart fixed. That's a good goal, Malcolm said seriously. We'll need someone to take over eventually. Not for a long time though, Ivy added quickly. You and Mommy have to run it for a while first. I need to finish school. Fair enough. They sat in comfortable silence, 3 people who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Malcolm thought about the journey that had led here. The accident that had broken his body but ultimately opened his heart. The lonely years of rebuilding. The random decision to try dating that had led him to this cafe. The little girl who'd noticed his sadness and decided to help. Every moment, every choice, every seemingly random event had been leading here. I've been thinking, Nora said, about expanding our family. Malcolm turned to look at her. Expanding? Maybe fostering. Maybe adoption. There are so many kids who need homes, who need love. We have space, resources, so much love to give. What would you think about opening our home to more children? Malcolm felt his heart expand. I think that sounds perfect. Ivy, what do you think? Would you like brothers or sisters? Ivy's eyes went wide. Really? We could get more kids. If you want. Kids who need a family like you needed a daddy? Yes. Let's get all the kids. A whole house full of kids. They laughed at her enthusiasm, but Malcolm was already thinking about the possibilities. They could do this. They had the space, the resources, the love. They could give more children the kind of stable, loving home every child deserved. Over the next few months, they began the process of becoming foster parents. Training classes, home studies, interviews. It was intensive and sometimes invasive, but Malcolm understood why. They were asking to care for vulnerable children. The system needed to be sure they could handle it. In late spring, a year and a half after Malcolm and Nora had first met, they received their first placement. 2 brothers, ages 7 and 9, who'd been in foster care for 2 years after being removed from a neglectful home. Marcus and Devin were quiet, cautious, clearly expecting to be moved again soon. They didn't believe in permanent anything. Malcolm and Nora worked patiently to show them that this home was different. That they were safe here. That love didn't have to be earned or conditional. It wasn't easy. The boys tested boundaries, acted out, pushed back. But Malcolm and Nora held steady, providing consistent love and support even when it was hard. Ivy was an unexpected gift in the process. She appointed herself the boys' tour guide and protector, showing them around the penthouse, introducing them to her school, explaining family rules with the authority of someone who'd been there longer. This is a good house, she told them seriously. People here love you even when you mess up. I know because I've tested it. Slowly, gradually, Marcus and Devin began to believe. They started calling Malcolm and Nora by their first names instead of maintaining distance. They did their homework without being reminded. They laughed at dinner. They asked questions about the future instead of assuming they had none. 6 months after Marcus and Devin arrived, their caseworker asked if Malcolm and Nora would consider adopting them. Their biological parents had terminated rights, and the boys needed a permanent home. Marcus and Devin, when asked, said yes immediately. Yes, they wanted to stay. Yes, they wanted to be part of this family. Yes, they wanted Malcolm and Nora to be their parents forever. The adoption was finalized on a Tuesday morning in family court, both boys wearing new suits that Malcolm had taken them to pick out. When the judge declared them legally adopted, Devin cried. Marcus tried not to but failed. And Malcolm held them both, these boys who'd been through so much and deserved so much better, and promised them that this was forever. They were a family of 5 now. Malcolm Prescott, CEO turned philanthropist, who'd learned that success measured in relationships was the only kind that mattered. Nora Prescott, nurse and advocate, who'd taught her family that strength came from vulnerability and connection. Ivy Prescott, future astronaut doctor artist, whose big heart and bright spirit lit up every room. Marcus Prescott, age 9, who'd learned that not all adults would hurt him. And Devin Prescott, age 7, who'd learned that families could choose you and keep you. The penthouse that had once been a sterile showcase was now chaos and color and love. Toys and books everywhere. Art projects covering every surface. Schedules posted on the refrigerator coordinating school and therapy appointments and extracurriculars. The sounds of children laughing, arguing, playing, learning. The beautiful disorder of a real home where real people lived fully. Malcolm's company continued to thrive, now under the daily management of his excellent COO. Malcolm focused on strategy and the aspects of business he most enjoyed, working from home most days so he could be present for his children. The Hope Foundation expanded, opening satellite offices in 3 other cities, funding groundbreaking research, helping hundreds of families access critical care. Richard, Malcolm's father, was now Grandpa Richard to all 3 children. He came to dinner weekly, learned to play the games the kids enjoyed, told stories about Malcolm's childhood that revealed a softer side no one knew existed. The reconciliation wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. On a Saturday afternoon in June, 2 years after Malcolm had sat alone in that cafe, the Prescott family gathered in the garden for a different kind of celebration. It was Ivy's 7th birthday, and she'd requested a space party. The garden was decorated with planets and stars, a telescope set up for later stargazing, constellation cakes that Nora had baked. Friends from school ran around, Marcus and Devin supervised the games, and Malcolm watched it all with profound contentment. Nora sat beside him, her hand in his, watching their children play. "Happy?" she asked. "Beyond measure," Malcolm replied. 2 years ago, I didn't think happiness like this was possible. I thought my life was over, or at least the good parts were. I was so wrong. We were both wrong about a lot of things. I thought I had to do everything alone. That accepting help was weakness. That opening my heart again was too risky. Turns out, the risk was worth it. The best risk I ever took. Ivy ran over, dragging both brothers behind her. "Daddy, Mommy, come see. We're doing a presentation about the solar system, and I need you to be the audience." They followed their daughter to where she'd set up an elaborate display, complete with handmade visual aids and a script she'd written herself. For the next 20 minutes, Ivy, Marcus, and Devin presented everything they'd learned about space, their enthusiasm infectious, their facts occasionally questionable but always delivered with absolute conviction. As Malcolm watched his 3 children work together, he felt a wave of emotion so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. This was his life now. These were his children. This was his family. Built not from blood or obligation but from choice. From showing up. From choosing love even when it was hard. From believing that kindness and hope could lead to something extraordinary. Later that night, after the party ended and the children were asleep, Malcolm and Nora stood on their balcony overlooking the city. The lights stretched out before them, millions of lives being lived, millions of stories unfolding. Somewhere out there, maybe someone was sitting alone. Feeling like life was over, believing that happiness was impossible. Malcolm hoped they'd find their own version of what he'd found. Their own unexpected family. Their own reason to hope. "What are you thinking?" Nora asked. "That I'm grateful. For the accident, strange as that sounds. Because without it, I would have missed all of this. I would have been too busy, too focused on work, too closed off to notice a little girl asking why I looked sad. The accident broke me, but it also opened me to possibilities I never would have considered before. I'm grateful too. For every hard thing that led us both to that cafe at exactly the right moment. For Ivy's heart condition, terrible as that sounds, because without it, we might not have had a reason to talk again after that first day. Every painful thing we both went through was preparing us for this. Do you think it's fate? That we were meant to find each other? I think we made choices that led us to each other. You chose to try dating again. I chose to take Ivy for hot chocolate at that specific cafe. Ivy chose to speak to you. You chose to accept our company. We kept choosing each other over and over, even when it was scary or uncertain. Maybe that's what love is. Not fate but choice. Choosing someone every single day. Malcolm pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her warmth against him. Then I choose you. Today and every day after. Forever. Forever, Nora agreed. Inside, one of the children called out, "A bad dream or a request for water?" And they moved as one back into the penthouse, back to their beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. Malcolm wheeled down the hallway, Nora beside him, ready to comfort whichever child needed them, ready for another day of parenthood's challenges and rewards. As he tucked Devon back into bed after a nightmare, reassuring him that he was safe and loved and would never be sent away, Malcolm thought about that man in the cafe 2 years ago. The bitter, lonely man who'd given up on happiness. He wanted to tell that man to hold on. To believe that good things could still happen. To trust that even in darkness there was light waiting. But he didn't need to tell that man anything. Because that man had found his way here, to this moment, to this life. That man had been brave enough to accept kindness when it was offered. Smart enough to recognize love when it appeared. Strong enough to build something new from the wreckage of his old life. That man had become this man. A husband. A father. A philanthropist. A person who measured success in hugs and laughter and children's drawings on the refrigerator. A person who knew that the best things in life couldn't be bought or earned or achieved through determination alone. They could only be received with open hands and an open heart. As Malcolm returned to his own bed, sliding under the covers beside Nora, he felt complete. Not because his life was perfect, because it wasn't. Raising 3 children was exhausting and challenging and sometimes frustrating. Running a foundation was complex and demanding. Maintaining his business required constant attention. His relationship with his father was still healing and probably always would be. But it was real. All of it. The struggles and the triumphs, the hard days and the easy ones, the love that was tested and proved stronger for it. This was life. Full, complicated, beautiful life. And Malcolm wouldn't trade a single moment of it. He thought about Ivy's words from her birthday party, "Stars give us hope when it's dark." That was true. But he'd learned something else. Sometimes hope came from unexpected places. From a little girl who noticed sadness and decided to help. From a woman who taught him to see differently. From brothers who needed a home and helped him build one. From a father who'd learned to change even when it was hard. Hope came from choosing to stay open. From accepting help. From believing that tomorrow could be better than today. From kindness that led to connection that led to love that led to family. Outside, the city lights continued to shine. Inside, his family slept peacefully. And Malcolm, once broken and bitter, now whole and grateful, closed his eyes and dreamed of the future. A future full of possibility. A future he'd build one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. Forever had begun. And it was more beautiful than anything he could have imagined.